Welcome. Ian Doyle is my name. I work for the Heritage Council and joined by my colleague Amanda Ryan, the Grants Manager. And as we embark on another year of the HTI programme, the Historic Towns Initiative, in partnership between the Heritage Council and the department. So without me saying too much more, I'm going to hand over to two people. First to Fionnuala May, who is a member of the Heritage Council Board. Many of you will also know her from her role as architect in Fingal County Council. Just to say a few words of welcome on behalf of the Heritage Council, and then we'll go to Dan Sinnott, Principal Officer in the Built Heritage Policy Unit of the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. So over to you first, Fionnuala, please.
Thanks, Ian. Díomh go léir agus fáilte. Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to this webinar, which is designed to inform you about the Historic Towns Initiative. It's in support of the Town Centre First, a policy approach for Irish towns, which was published in 2022. The Historic Towns Initiative is a joint undertaking by the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage and the Heritage Council, which aims to promote the heritage-led regeneration of Ireland's historic towns. The recently published exploration of an Irish town by Professor Daniel Miller, which explores its ethnography juxtaposed with philosophical inquiry, is an interesting study and shows us what can be learned from a respectful acknowledgement of what can be achieved in a town. The study of the town illustrates the creation of a successful community, something to which we all aspire to in one way or another. And of course, the foundation of the study is that people live in the town. The Historic Towns Initiative for 2024 aims to provide support to historic towns engaged in a programme of heritage-led generation. And this year, we're particularly interested in projects that address residential vacancy in town centres. Also projects that purpose the reuse of historic structures and that can act as demonstrators for future projects and encourage more work in this area. We'll continue with two funding streams for the HTI in 2024, and Ian and Amanda will speak at the end of the seminar on the detail of the scheme. But first today, we're going to hear what has been achieved by the initiative with 6 case studies of projects from all over the country. And I have no doubt that the inspirational work will inspire and encourage all of you who are contemplating engaging with the scheme. So I'm no doubt that we're going to have a really informative and very interesting morning. So with that, I'll just hand you back to Ian, who'll introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Fionnuala. And then just to Dan Sinnott, just a few words on behalf of the department. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'll be very brief. Just wanted to welcome you all on behalf of the department, and to thank you for your engagement with the Historic Towns Initiative. I understand that it probably requires an outsized effort to pull together the applications and to deliver the projects once they're funded, but from everything I've seen, it also gives an outsized impact. With some of the grant programs where the money is dispersed very, very widely across the country, it's very hard to see the impact for ordinary citizens, I suppose, walking around and going about their daily business to see the impact. But the lovely thing about the Historic Towns Initiative is how focused it is on one place, and by taking a series of small measures in that place, it can really give a lift to the whole town. A lift not just in terms of sort of the way it appears and the psychological benefits that might come from that, but a lift in terms of activity, commercial activity, people wanting to live there, shop there, work there, and the knock-on effects that can have on the life of a town. So I think we'll really see some of that in the presentations this morning. So I would encourage you that, despite the fact that I know it's very heavy lifting, it really is worth it. There's a great payoff from it at the end of the process. One thing just to mention, and we'll hear from Pauline Reardon, who's been working really hard to develop a new ERDF funding programme targeted at historic buildings, which I think can dovetail really nicely with the Historic Towns Initiative. Pauline's been doing fantastic work on that with support from Nikki Matthews from my section here, and also with her colleagues in the regional assemblies, Rose Power and Patrick Devine. And some of you may have heard my joke already, but if you were early into the meeting, but it's very reassuring to know that even if all else fails, we still have divine power in the background to help us out with the Thrive initiative. So look, just to say thanks very much everyone for joining and for your continued engagement with the program, and I hope you enjoy this morning's webinar. Thanks very much, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Dan, and thanks for the joke too. And thank you, Fanula. So that's a nice segue into introducing Pauline from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. Pauline's going to give us a sense of the next 20 minutes of the ERDF Thrive Fund to be run with the local assemblies. So thanks, Pauline.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can we all see that?
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to move to presenter view? Will that work? Yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay, thanks, Ian, and thanks, Daniel, for that great introduction. I'm a planning advisor here in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and over the last year or so, we've been working very closely with our colleagues on the heritage side, and in consultation with the Heritage Council, and indeed with our esteemed colleagues, Patrick Devine and Rose Power, in the two regional assemblies who are here today. And the regional assemblies are the managing authorities in Ireland for the European Regional Development Fund. So we've been designing a new scheme for the new programming period, which runs up to 2027 for these regional programs in Ireland. And I'm going to give you a little preview today of the Thrive scheme, which, as well as the Historic Towns Initiative, is also in support of the government's Town Centre First policy. And it is named so because it's the Town Centre First Heritage Revival Fund. Okay, just to start with a little bit of an overview of the ERDF in Ireland. The ERDF, it aims to address regional imbalances between regions in Europe. There's a pot of about 850 million for Ireland, and in particular, I'm going to present to you now on Priority 3, which is the Thrive Fund, and it has a focus on integrated sustainable urban development. About 15% of the pot, 120 million, is made available under this scheme. Now, actually, that's quite positive for Ireland because there's a minimum spend of 8%, and that actually represents double that. About 15% of the overall ERDF pot is going on sustainable urban development. So I suppose that's reflective of the focus on towns of all sizes across Ireland. I mentioned that the regional assemblies are the managing authorities for ERDF, and there's two programs. So I know there's 3 regions in Ireland, but for the purposes of this particular ERDF fund, there's 2 programs. So there's the Southern, Eastern and Midland regional program, and that has been allocated 90 million out to 2027, and the Northern and Western regional program, which has been allocated 30 million. Local authorities are the main beneficiaries of the fund, and these are targeted at the designated settlements in the National Planning Framework and the regional spatial and economic strategies. And just to say, I suppose from the outset, what's different about this new programming period, I suppose a lot has changed since the previous program, which was designed in 2014, and that was mainly targeted at public realm and public infrastructure type projects. And of course, in the meantime, I suppose we've seen a significant public investment in Ireland through the URDF, through the regional, the RRDF, and various other public funds that are funding public realm and public infrastructure across the country. So we were keen for this particular funding round that we weren't going to duplicate that funding, and more importantly, that we would address an identified gap in funding. And as I suppose you'll all well know, there is a particular gap in heritage funding for larger grants, when we were working with our colleagues in Heritage, it was identified that many of the Heritage grants are smaller in scale and what they can do, which is very useful, but in terms, they tend to be focused, I suppose, more on rehabilitation of buildings, preventing them from deteriorating any further. So the focus of this particular fund is to make more money available with the focus on reuse and activation of existing heritage stock. Okay, as I mentioned, this is aligned with the National Planning Framework and Sustainable Urban Development in Ireland. So I'm just showing here the designated settlements in the National Planning Framework and in the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategies. These are the settlements that the funding is targeted towards. So that does include the 5 cities, so Dublin and the 4 regional cities. It includes the 5 regional growth centres, Sligo, Letterkenny, Athlone, Dundalk and Drogheda, and 31 key towns across the country. I'm not going to go through them all here, but you'll have these slides afterwards for your information. Just to note that this means that all of the local authorities are eligible to submit at least one application. A number of local authorities, actually Tipperary, I think, has 3 key towns. A number of other local authorities have 2 towns. And for those local authorities, say, for example, Fingal, which would have part of their administrative area in a city and would also have a key town, they are eligible for 2 applications in that instance. So some key policy drivers that informed us when we were designing this new programming period scheme. At a national level, I suppose we have a completely different planning policy cycle that's in place since the previous programme period for the ERDF. We've had the publication of the National Planning Framework in 2018, followed by the publication of the Regional Spatial Economic Strategies across 2019 and 2020. And we've seen that policy cycle cascade down to the renewal of city and county development plans across the country. And that, I suppose, policy cycle is nearly complete at the moment. Key national objectives there are promoting balanced regional development and compact growth. And we've also seen some key cross-government policies that have been come into place as well. So specifically the Town Centre First. And there are specific actions in both Housing for All and Town Centre First for the ERDF that it should be harnessed to tackle vacancy and dereliction and drive town centre regeneration. And as Daniel mentioned, we hope that this fund actually will be very complementary to the Historic Towns Initiative. I think there's a lot of synergies between the 2 funds. Just one more thing to note, it is underpinned by investment in the National Development Plan. I mentioned already the significant investment that has happened through the URDF and the RRDF, the 2 regeneration and development funds. But in terms of the EU ERDF, they are co-financed by the EU now. Now Ireland is, I suppose, the co-financing rates are 40% for the southern and eastern Midland regions because they're considered in EU terms to be more developed regions, and the co-financing rate from the EU is 60% for the northwestern region because that region is designated as a region in transition. We're conscious that maybe these might not make this fund so attractive to a certain amount of local authorities who may be resource constrained in terms of the need to put matching funding towards it. So in this instance, the National Exchequer through the National Development Plan is actually supplementing the EU co-financing rates. So this round of ERDF is going to be 100% grant. So that's key, I think, in terms of making it attractive to local authorities as the main beneficiaries. Okay, so from an EU level, there were some key policy drivers as well. The EU are very keen to promote new European Bauhaus in Ireland. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have any new European Bauhaus projects to date, but it is a key policy that the EU adopted in 2020, and it connects the EU Green Deal to urban areas. There are other horizontal principles for EU projects that projects would have to demonstrate that they're aligned with, and key to that is that the EU are looking for projects that have high visibility, high impact, that they can demonstrate sustainability, and meet climate goals. In particular, actually, the reuse of cultural heritage stock was one of the themes in New European Bauhaus. So really that was kind of a good fit for what we were looking to achieve in this round of funding. Finally, EU projects also have to demonstrate alignment with principles of equality. And really that's about creating inclusive, accessible places. Because these are the two key policy areas that we are looking for projects to be aligned with, the Town Centre First and the New European Bauhaus, I just have a couple of slides here which will just really, I suppose, give you some practical guidance on how you might demonstrate such when you're putting together applications for these funds. So just to start with New European Bauhaus, it aims to create beautiful, sustainable, inclusive places. And the method by which it seeks to do so is very important. It's highly participatory and it puts a focus on multidisciplinary working. So what we'd be looking for is project teams that bring together various disciplines from planners, architects, engineers, project managers, and crucially, the conservation skills. So we want to see project teams that include conservation officers and heritage officers in the design and implementation of projects. There are a number of toolkits and resources in place that can help you, I suppose, apply a new European Bauhaus approach, which is essentially using co-creation methods. And there's tools such as the Compass method. We will be running workshops on this, and just to note as well, the new European Bauhaus, the national contact point, Nikki Matthews, is actually based in the department here. So there'll be a whole, I suppose, series of capacity building there just to coach you in applying new European Bauhaus principles. To mention also, the department built heritage publications and advice series will also prove helpful in this regard. And I believe that more recently that the retrofitting of heritage buildings guidance has been updated, so that will also prove helpful in designing, I suppose, projects that meet good conservation principles as well as the new European Bauhaus. So the key thing really here to note is that this approach, it involves stakeholders and citizens in the design and implementation of projects, and that it's cross-disciplinary in its approach as well. And that is actually very well aligned with the whole Town Centre First framework. I'm just going to give you, I suppose, a quick kind of highlight of some of the key elements of Town Centre First, and it's probably timely. The policy has been in place since 2022, but we're just coming to the end of the first round of Town Centre First plans that have been produced across the country. And I just wanted to give you a little preview here of the new Town Centre First website at towncentrefirst.ie, which has been produced by the National Town Centre First offices based in the LGMA. There will be an official launch for these plans and the website indeed in March, but it is actually live at the moment. So you can get to it at that link. And I suppose it's going to be a key resource for both citizens and placemaking practitioners in terms of rolling out the Town Centre First to towns of all sizes, which is what we want to see. So keep an eye on that. There'll be resources there, and the National Office is actually going to create guidance based on a review and the learnings from those first round of plans, so that the TCF, the Town Centre First approach, can be applied more widely to other cities and towns. And just there's three key elements that I might just highlight in terms of what we want to see with potential projects aligning with Town Centre First, and that's really that they're collaborative, plan-led and delivery-focused proposals. Just to note, there are also, I suppose, under Town Centre First, there has been established over the last couple of years national local support structures and dedicated staff that are now in place. There's a town regeneration officer in 26 of the non-city local authorities across Ireland now, and they're working in a multidisciplinary manner in their local authority, and they provide support to town teams, which comprise local businesses and communities who are tasked with producing a Town Centre First plan. And those plans, what they do is they set out a vision for their town, and crucially, they're action orientated. So they're intended to identify and develop priority projects and do that engagement so that those projects have local buy-in. I mentioned already there's a at national level, there's a National Town Centre First office, and they're tasked with sharing best practice and building capacity. And they'll be rolling out a capacity building programme over the next year as well. And I suppose on this ERDF being one of the Town Centre First aligned funds, we're seeing a lot of funds that are including Town Centre First in their criteria, including the Town and Village Renewal Scheme and various other grants, such as Built Heritage. Okay, so what kind of projects do we want to see? So firstly, we want projects to show that they have included this participatory and collaborative approach in line with Town Centre First, a new European Bauhaus. I have an example here of two Town Centre First plans who produce Town Centre First plans. And they're the two towns that are actually also designated towns. So many of the Town Centre First towns, the pilot towns, tend to be smaller in scale. And the idea being that those towns may not have local area plans, so the Town Centre First plans helps them develop a plan-led approach. But these two instances, both Carrick-on-Shannon and Longford, they are actually towns that have been designated for growth in the National Planning Framework and the regional strategies. So just to kind of give you a flavour of the kind of the participatory approach, on the bottom there, you can see some of the snapshots of the local engagement that happened in Carrick-on-Shannon. And what we're seeing is the Town Centre First plans are doing this really, really well. They have a whole range of participatory methods from the town teams themselves, but also more widely in terms of planning for real exercises, open days, youth workshops, and so on. So there's a huge, I suppose, growing best practice in terms of engagement methods that we are seeing. I mentioned Longford as well. Longford is an interesting town because it actually it's over 10,000, but just over 10,000. It actually qualifies for both urban and rural fundings, but they produced a Town Centre First plan as well, and they actually have identified a key heritage proposal as one of their flagship projects in the plan. But I just want to highlight that it's actually not just Town Centre First and New European Bauhaus that are promoting participative methods. Longford has a history of using very innovative engagement methods, and they previously took part in an URBACT project called MAPS, which was all about involving stakeholders in the reuse of the barracks in the town. And I'm actually also maybe of interest to some of you, there is an URBACT information day ongoing at the moment because there's a new call for knowledge transfer networks under URBACT happening today. So it's a good day for funding, lots of launches today. So the key thing to take from this is that we want to see analysis-led and community engagement in these project proposals, and that's key to ensure local buy-in for projects that might come out of these plans. I have one more example here and of how to follow a plan-led approach, and this is actually from a project that was supported under the current round of ERDF funding, which is the development of a civic and cultural quarter in Swords around Swords Castle. So it's an interesting example because it is actually a heritage project that was supported under the current ERDF programme. And just to show you here that all the pieces were in place here to show a plan-led approach. So the proposal was supported by development objectives in the county development plan and identified in the regional spatial strategies as well. The Fingal had actually been successful in securing Historic Towns Initiative funding, I believe, for the production of a conservation plan. So they could show that that was in place, and they also had an urban design framework in place. So just to kind of show you how it really pays to have a plan-led approach, and maybe an example of how the Historic Towns Initiative can be complementary to securing other larger matching funds as well, such as ERDF. Okay, I'll just finish up now, just to kind of give you a little bit more information about the different funding streams that will be covered under this programme. So I mentioned that it is delivery focused. So what we want to do through the ERDF is we want to develop a project pipeline for construction ready projects. And we'll have two strands of funding. by which to achieve this. So the first strand will cover plans and enhancement of plans, and also some project development measures. And the idea is that we would be supporting projects that aren't quite at a stage of readiness to bring them to a state where they would be ready to apply for strand 2 capital works funding. So under strand 1, we'll cover things like feasibility, site surveys, enabling works, and also the work involved in securing planning consents, conservation plans, and so forth. What we would expect to see then for strand 2 projects, the capital work projects, is that they are ready to go. So the design would be in place, consents would be in place, environmental assessments would be carried out, if required, historic character assessment as well, that would all be in place. And that brings you to basically the strand 2, which is funding the renovation and adaptive reuse of heritage buildings in town centres. And that's what we want to achieve. Quick note on the eligibility of the building or buildings. They do need to be public owned, so either by the local authority or by another public body with property transfer agreement. They do need to have a heritage status. And this is key, I suppose, to our consultations with the Heritage Council and our own Heritage Division, that it's important to ensure that we are these buildings are properly protected if they're going to get funding, heritage funding. So they need to be a protected structure or a proposed protected structure, or buildings located within an architectural conservation area. We have quite a broad eligibility, so it could be large-scale institutional or industrial buildings such as schools, barracks, churches, convents, castles, and so on, or smaller scale historic landmarks such as banks, post offices, courthouses, etc., that have fallen into redundancy, but where their reuse can drive significant town centre regeneration. Now, this could involve works to an individual building or to collections or a complex of buildings, but crucially, the projects that will be awarded strand 2 capital works funding, they must identify a viable end use or a mix of uses. We haven't defined what that use might be, so we're trying to leave it as flexible as possible. The key aim being to rehabilitate underused, underutilized and vacant buildings and bring them back into use to promote town centre regeneration. So my last 2 slides here, just go into a little bit more detail on the T's and C's around each of these strands. I won't go through all the details here. You'll have them available afterwards. We can circulate the slides. But just to note, in terms of strand 1, for integrated urban strategies and project pipeline development, each local authority can submit 1 application for each designated settlement under this strand. It is a competitive call, and we'll be awarding between 40,000 and 200,000 for each designated settlement. So we're going to go live with these calls on February the 8th. There'll be a 2-month application period for strand 1. And strand 2, we're also going to go live with an open call on February the 8th, but we'll have a more limited pot of money made available for the strand 2 capital works funding. I suppose, we're not sure how many projects are out there that are ready to go. And we also want to leave, I suppose, monies available for a second call for strand 2, which will probably be around this time next year. And the idea there is to, I suppose, allow applicants who are successful in drawing down strand 1 funding, that they would have a pathway whereby they can move on and draw down funding for capital works this time next year. So just in terms of creating that project pipeline. So for strand 2, again, it's competitive, and even more competitive because it's a larger grant of between 2 and 7 million. So this is larger than some of the existing heritage grants. So we're hoping that this will be complementary to the Historic Towns Initiative in giving that pathway for larger grant funds in bringing back heritage buildings in our towns. And this will be, we will be accepting 1 application per local authority. I think I've made a mistake there in my presentation. This is one application per local authority. I will change that before they're circulated. Just to note also, we're not covering staff costs in Strand 2. We will in Strand 1, but not in Strand 2. The idea being that this is 100% grant fund. So in order to demonstrate, I suppose, their commitment, local authorities will need to show that they have, I suppose, senior management commitment, and also that they'll have multidisciplinary staff available for the project team. Okay, so that's my final slide here. That just kind of sets out the next steps. As I mentioned, the call will be opened on February the 8th. We will be running capacity building workshops, particularly for local authorities that are interested in that Strand 2 funding, which will actually have a longer application window. We'll leave that open for 3 months because there are particular requirements that those applications will need to demonstrate in terms of some of complying with EU horizontal principles, with the new European Bauhaus, and certain climate proofing, and do no significant harm assessments that the EU have as a requirement for their funding. So today, I suppose it's a little bit, it's engagement to promote these new funding opportunities. I'm going to finish off here with some contact details from my colleagues in the Southern and Eastern programme and the Northwestern programme areas. I believe the contact emails are live now, and once the calls are live, the call documentation, which we're currently finalising, will go up at those links. And I'll finish up there. I'll stop sharing my screen. I want to thank everyone for their time today.
Pauline, we have 3 questions, if you're able to, if you have time to answer them now. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, I'll fire away. First, we have, do buildings with recorded monument status qualify if not a protected structure?
I believe, and actually my colleague Daniel might be able to come in and give a little bit more information here, because this is one area that we discussed quite closely with our colleagues in Built Heritage. I believe we have some flexibility in the language of the implementation plan that we will consider exceptional projects. The primary target is protected structures and buildings within an ACA, but I think we have an inbuilt flexibility there. Daniel, you might be able to say a word on that.
Sorry, Daniel, if you unmute.
We might, I think.
No, Daniel, sorry, we can't hear you.
Hmm.
Oh, we have you now.
Am I back in now?
We have you.
Sorry. Yep, I was just switching between microphones there. Yeah, that's right, Pauline. I think it says I think it just says sort of in normal circumstances, or maybe it says in exceptional circumstances we can consider other buildings. So so I think that would be a circumstance. Now the funding is for reuse of buildings, so it you know, in general it won't be for sort of archaeological monuments, but yeah, there might be recorded monuments which are reusable and which aren't protected structures, and I'm sure they can be considered.
Thanks, Daniel. So next question is, thanks, Pauline. Does the scheme included for structures or on the RMP SMR that main, oh, that's the very same, sorry, I think you've answered that. Next question is, how do you see the ERDF be managed in local authorities? Would it fall to the Conservation Officer, Heritage Officer, Town Regeneration Officer? Can you encourage a heritage-led multidisciplinary team for local authority to manage the funding if successful?
Well, I think I can give a short and sweet answer to that. Yes, absolutely. All of those, if they are available. We do. We want to see multidisciplinary teams, and that's built into the criteria.
Good. Can you please clarify what is meant by town centre re the scheme, i.e. if a heritage building is local authority ownership and is located on the edge of the town, would this be eligible for Thrive?
Absolutely. That's actually very clearly set out in the scheme, and it's probably tied to, I suppose, the National Compact Settlements objective in the National Planning Framework. So the town centre is defined as that built up area of the town or city, and it's linked to the Central Statistics Office boundary, the CSO boundary.
For Strand 2, do Part 8s have to be in place in advance of an application?
Yes, we would expect that Part 8s would be in place, and I suppose that is part of why we are funding and putting such a emphasis on citizen engagement as part of the Strand 1 funding, because we want to make sure that there's local buy-in for these projects, that they don't get derailed in a Part 8 process by objections.
And just the final is, I suppose, more question for everyone. Can the seminar presentations be circulated, please? If everyone is agreeable on the panel, we can certainly publish them on our website. Is probably the easiest way to distribute. So that's all the queries for now. Pauline, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So thank you, Pauline. Really, really interesting. It's going to be a great scheme. Moving swiftly on, and I think Pauline, have you to move on to another meeting, but thank you so much for that. And I note your two colleagues from the Regional Assembly, Rose Power from the Southern Assembly and Patrick Devine from the Northern one, will be present. So if there are any further questions, we can rely on both of those. So thank you very much for that. Our next speaker then is Moira Cullinan. And Moira is Senior Planner in Monaghan County Council, and she's going to tell us about the Dublin Street Monaghan Town Reuse Project. Now, good morning, Moira.
Good morning, Ian.
Let's see if we can get your slides up. Brilliant. That we can see that. Can you go to presenter view? Brilliant. We can see that. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay, Ian, thanks for the invitation. I know I was here this time last year presenting on this scheme as well. Historic, this was the re-establishment of residential use in historic Dublin Street, Monaghan, and it's funded in 2022. And what we've been looking at is facade enhancements and internal design and refurbishment of two properties as well within the Dublin Street itself. And I suppose a little bit in the historic context, with Dublin Street radiates from the central diamond area down with part of the street pattern is the radiating streets from the Diamond and Dublin Street leading down to Old Cross Square. And I suppose Dublin Street itself is a series of terraces of 3-storey structures, generally 2 to 3 bay width, and interspersed with laneways through archways and long rear annexes extending into the depth of the plots and the backlands. So we went through a selection process before we submitted the application for the Historic Towns Initiative, which involved conservation architects carrying out individual owner consultation, having regard to the, I suppose, considerations of the overall visual impact on the street and how it would contribute towards the active use of the properties. So as part of this initial engagement process and selection process, we selected and got agreement from 8 property owners to participate in the scheme and to look at internal refurbishment works to 2 of the properties. So let's say 8 properties over 2 terraces, and and we went through the process for tender for conservation architect to consult the owners to define the scope of the works and procurement of the supervision of the works. And these individual elements included decluttering of services and fixings, signage, etc., timber window or shop front repair and replacement, and repair and replacement of guttering with cast iron, and the preparation and painting of rendered surfaces. And this, I suppose, is an example of some of the drawings produced by the architect detailing the works, which was used, I suppose, to demonstrate to the owner the extent of the works, but also to use for tendering for building services to carry out the works also. And just, I suppose, go through the process of the building facade enhancements and take you up to where we are and what we've done in this so far. With the council tendered for the appointment of conservation architect to consult the owners, provide the scope to procure and supervise the works on site. And then following that, the conservation architect was responsible for consulting the owners, engaging with the local authority, defining the scope of the works for both the building contractor and the window manufacturer also. I suppose we had limited submissions received in August 2022, which were over budget, and some incomplete submissions required clarifications from the tenderers, and also looking for additional funding from the Heritage Council, and reviewing the works and the budget, and including additional match funding requirement with the owners. So I suppose the Heritage Council did provide additional funding for that, which was in October 2022. And then we did secure the upfront match funding from the property owners. And then it was a case then we proceeded then with 5 of the 8 properties. 3 had withdrawn from the process. One of the owners passed away. There was a legal title issue. And then another owner that was going to concentrate on their own funds on other elements of repair to the property. Then we had the initial works contractor declined the contract in Q1 of 23, so we had to move to the second highest tender and review the costs, and again agree with the Heritage Council. So finally the contractor has commenced works in December, so we're hoping that those works will come to completion in February. So I suppose that's an example of the works that have been ongoing there on the site as well. And then supposed to move to the internal design element for properties numbers 24 and 50. Number 24 is Sherry's pub with living accommodation over. Of course, it's a protected structure. The pub is actually leased out and is currently occupied, whereas the upper accommodation has been vacant for a number of years, and it's all, I suppose, in a family ownership, where the family would have lived in that over the pub in the past. Number 50 is a vacant retail with living accommodation above, and I suppose the whole unit is vacant. So 3 working stages: the preliminary design drawings, the developed design and statutory applications, and the project reporting and handover of the drawings. So it's just, I suppose, take you through the extent of the process and all the stages involved. So I suppose stage 1 is the preliminary design drawings, and that involved the appointment of the PSDP and issuance of the AF1 form to the Health and Safety Authority, followed by the coordination and liaison with the council and the property owners. The conservation architect carried out a detailed review of the properties. Surveyors were invited to tender to carry out digital surveys of both properties, and following receipt of tenders issued to the council with the tender report for review. Surveyors appointed to carry out surveys on both properties, followed then by the preliminary layout design for agreement with the property owners. And then to look, I suppose, at the fire safety and disability access, engineers were invited to tender to carry out for the preparation of the certification applications. And following, I suppose, the receipt of tenders, these were issued to the council with the tender report review and engineers appointed to carry out the certification applications. And then continuing on, just preliminary design process progressed as an iterative process, including progress in the layout designs based on the digital surveys, the property owners, fire safety and disability access consultants and the scheme architects. And then the designs were adjusted to balance the client requirements, the design to the conservation and planning and building regulations. At this stage, it was finalised with agreement from the property owners regarding the optimum design layout to meet the client's needs. I suppose some key considerations for property number 24, the pub, was the layout of the public house in the context of the current lease arrangement with the existing tenant, and considered to minimise the alterations to the interior and facilitate optional elements, including the likes of a gable window and ensuite bathrooms. And number 50, with the client to omit an ensuite and provision of main bathroom and shower room, and ensure the provision of 3 bedrooms. So, say, ongoing process of constant engagement with property owners, and tie that in with all the various design elements. And then, suppose, number 24, the Sherry's property. So what's the optimal solution there is one dwelling unit over the existing pub, which is potential for 4 bedrooms and a home office, and looking at some of the individual enhancements there, the reinstatement of the original entrance to the pub and to the centre of the building where the I suppose entrance originally was, and creating a separate independent entrance then to the dwelling. Then I was looking at providing then a south facing window to the living room on the first level, and also the inclusion of bathrooms and private open space balcony as well. And then number 50, some of the individual elements there were the separation of access from the shop and the upper floors, and to provide the access to the upper floors via side entry, and which also included the need for a fire rating as well. And also to look at the structural opening to form living and dining space, to create I suppose, a single area living and dining space to meet, I suppose, modern needs, and also the provision of bathrooms on first and second levels. And maybe when you receive these presentations, you'll be able to zoom in and see the extent of some of that detail on those drawings as well. And then looking at stage 2, the developed design, and this process provides them more detailed review of the building fabric of both properties to inform the planning application for number 24 and the fire safety and disability access for both the properties. And with planning application for number 24, just run through the process of it, included the pre-planning consultation with the planning team and discussion on key issues in relation to the protected status to ensure the residential amenity of adjoining properties, and I suppose the amenity of the dwelling itself being proposed. And planning application was submitted by the conservation architect on behalf of the applicant, including drawings for the existing proposed plan sections and elevations, architectural heritage impact assessment, including a photographic record and building fabric analysis. And then I suppose the detailed design, including modifications to the external facades, to include design of new shop front door and upgrading the fire ratings, and along with the administrative documents application form and newspaper notices and site notices and planning report. So a final grant of permission was issued on that in July 2023. And just continuing on that, the fire safety and disability certificate applications were progressed while the plan application was being prepared. Fire safety for number 24 submitted in parallel with the planning application, and preparing, I suppose, both ensured that the design layout and detailed design aligned with the requirements under building regulations. The appointment of the Eamon Boyle and Associates, specialists in fire safety and disability access, would have collaborated then with the architects and the council and the fire safety officer to arrive at optimal arrangements, I suppose, to balance the client requirements, the design and planning, and the building regulation requirements. And similarly then with number 50, to ensure the fire safety and disability access arrangements as well for the client. The fire safety and disability access applications for properties were submitted by Eamon O'Boyle and Associates. And I suppose just confirm the process there, the plan approval for number 24 in July 23, disability certificate in October, and fire safety in August, and similarly then with number 50 in the fire safety and disability access. And so our next steps with this is to provide, I suppose, a specification of the works and for supervision of the building works by a conservation architect, and we'll have our conservation architect working up specifications for this currently to be able to go to tender for works. I suppose some of the drawings nearly associated with the whole process. That's an example of the architectural heritage assessment. Looking at, I suppose, the colour coding in there, looking at changes to the building going back to the 1950s through up into 2000. It just shows maybe how different interventions have taken place in buildings over the time too. And this drawing shows example of the detail within into the, I suppose, the plan application and from the existing to the proposed works. And then we have the layouts for the disability certificate, fire safety certificates, and then similarly with number 50, the agreed layout along with the disability and fire safety certificates as well, drawings. Just some, I suppose, observations then on the project approach itself. And certainly involved interaction of multiple parties between the local authority, the owner, the architect, conservation architect, surveyors, structural engineers, the fire safety, disability access, the planning department and building control. And which I suppose you can understand, I suppose, why these processes take quite a time to get delivery on. And just look, it's the design and detailed design process requires a cross flow of information and multiple decisions to be made to address the various constraints and opportunities presented by the brief, by the client needs, and the structure and the regulations. And I suppose the extent of the information required as part of the planning process is in depth, including a full understanding of the structure, the building fabric review, including opening up works property also, and assessment of the impact on the significance of the structure itself. And there's also, I suppose, considerable knowledge and understanding of the structure at the design stage required to ensure the fire safety and disability access proposals don't undermine the character of the structure. And then I suppose we have the consideration of this decision making by owners, and some that can be a slow process, particularly if there are more than one family members involved, and trying to get consensus even with the family members, and for them to understand the whole process as well. And then just the final slide, I suppose, is reflection on the programme for government and implementing a strategic approach to town centre regeneration by utilising existing buildings and unused lands for new development and promote residential occupancy. I suppose some of the points to make here is the role of the local authorities to draw on the experiences and challenges of bringing town centre properties back into use, and to propose solutions. So I think maybe the local authorities need to, I suppose, bring those experiences, I suppose, to a think tank on how we best approach solutions to regeneration, and also, so it's again contributing to research and the evidence base in terms of the issues of regeneration and bringing properties back into use, and also need probably for hand-holding supports to property owners, the likes of property clinics, and I can see a role definitely that property owners maybe need certainly more supports in this area, and also the need then to build confidence at the individual level, and for the overall town centre through, I suppose, the way the local authorities can support the activation of vacant properties. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Moira.
Uh,
I think that really shows the complexity and the work that goes into the projects like that. Amanda, are you doing questions?
Yes, we have one question, Moira, and it's, Moira, the level of work Monaghan County Council have put into this is impressive. Is there a possibility to reuse some of this work and designs for other buildings elsewhere on the street or in other areas?
Well, I suppose there's certainly, we can look at the process, and I suppose all the individual properties probably individually built and of their own characteristics within the streetscape. So you wouldn't just use the exact same drawings, but certainly the process is there of how to go about it.
Thanks, Moira.
Okay. So thanks so much, Moira. Obviously, people can ask questions over the course of the morning, and we'll take some more at 11 o'clock. But that was great. It really shows how complex and just how long these projects take, and we're looking forward to seeing this one conclude as well. As I know you are. Our next project is Castle Island. So thanks, Maura. Our next project is Castle Island Streetscape Project, and the presenter, known to so many of you, is Victoria McCarthy, the Architecture Conservation Officer with Kerry County Council, and Dan and myself and colleagues had the opportunity to visit this project in September, and it was fantastic. So without saying much more, over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Ian.
We'll see if we can get your slides up. Yeah, that's perfect, and it's in presenter view.
Great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to Ian and Amanda for your kind invitation to speak to you this morning on the Historic Towns Initiative 2023 project in Castle Island, County Kerry. The name of the project was Home is on Main Street. So my talk this morning will be on three main areas. So I'm looking at the historic context of the street, the process by which we did the project, and also the 4 projects that were actually implemented. So is it going down for you there, Ian?
Are you moving? It's not moving. Can you try move it?
I'm trying moving it here. There's nothing happening.
Oh.
Oh, no, I wonder is there a bit of a lag on this?
maybe stop sharing and resharing.
Okay.
Victoria's probably.
Yeah, I'll just do that there now. Okay. It's moving.
Not yet. Okay, I do have your slides.
Okay, would you mind? So if that's okay,
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing there. So Ian, okay.
Okay, just bear with me. We'll try them as the PDF.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now, can you see that?
Perfect.
And it's moving too.
Yep. Lovely. Thank you. So
So
go to the
you just tell me when to move.
Yeah, just go on to the second slide, please, Ian. Thank you. So in terms of Castle Island, it is located to the, I suppose, southeast of Tralee and the north of Killarney. And the current planning policy for Castle Island in our county development plan is that it's been designated as a regional town in that it provides housing, employment and service functions within a local region. There's also a very strong recognition that improvements to the public realm and built environment will attract visitors and inward investment into the town. So I think that was a very important point that was made when the planning policy for the town was being developed. Also, of course, the plans acknowledge that Castle Island itself has a very strong urban form with a very rich cultural heritage, and has had historically a very important role to play within a wider agricultural hinterland. So next slide, please, Ian. So this is an aerial view of Castle Island town as it stands today on the right hand side. And just for a small bit of very early context, the town was basically developed around an Anglo-Norman castle that was developed by the Earls of Desmond when they came to the area in the mid, I suppose, 13th century. So next slide, please, Ian. This is a planning policy document, a map of the town as you from today, and you can see that there's a lot of development proposed for the town centre, and there are a number of regeneration areas designated, opportunity sites. The retail core is quite tight, all centred around the main street. Next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. And this is a map showing the current lie of the land in terms of protected structures, which you can see are located mostly along the town's main street. You may also notice that the main street is quite a wide street with development on either side with long, narrow plots, quite familiar, I suppose, territory to any one of us who would have a heritage or historic town within your functional areas, with a very, very tight historic core. Next slide, please, Ian. So just if held when the grant application process was open, whereby anyone who had a property in that study area could come in, meet myself, go through any questions, proposals, finance, whatever they had, I suppose on a one-to-one, because sometimes a public meeting mightn't be the best forum. So next slide, please. So the process, we initiated a third-party grant application process, which was advertised at local level, social, print media, the usual. We had an assessment panel then was created internally. An analysis was made of all the applications that were received. That then was submitted to our grant oversight team, who assessed all of the recommendations and the applications, and the outcome of that was then presented to our senior management team here at Kerry County Council, who formally approved the final applicants. The project was approved, and we also then did a request for quotation process, looking for a conservation architect to help Kerry County Council provide oversight, approve methodologies, and basically help with the monitoring of the project. And all works had to be completed by the start of October 2023, with monies drawn down in time for the November deadline. So next slide, please. So the final part of my presentation is looking at the 4 projects that received funding. So the first one here is the KDYS building, number 3 Main Street. And this is a protected structure and is in active use by the Kerry Diocesan Youth Service. So there's a nice amount of young activity in the building. This building was identified in Tidy Towns reports as needing some upgrading. So next slide, please. And here's just an image of it from the front. You'll see the top floor there in the image on the left-hand side. There's some lovely guttering running along the middle of the top dormer windows. There's beautiful shop front, nice detailing, and a significant amount of care is needed to improve the aesthetics of the building. And that is on the image on the right-hand side. We have a very, very nice crack running up through the centre, the middle part of the gable there that you can see, and that was causing some concern, and of course the whole place covered in sand and cement render. So next slide, please. So works were approved to remove that render on the gable, deal with the crack. So we, the structural engineer was involved with that to come up with a proposal to strap that crack and fill it. These are some images of the works that were ongoing. So next slide, please, Ian. And some roofing work to the front was also approved, and upgrading then just to the facade of the front. So that was kind of really a cosmetic job to the front elevation. So next slide, please, Ian. And this is the finished product. The gable was rendered in lime, the crack was sorted out. Now it's not yet painted, we're waiting for things to settle. The front elevation was repainted, and it was lovely to be able to suggest to the building owner to maybe trot over to Listowel and have a look at some of the painting schemes of the HTI projects that have been completed in Listowel. And it's lovely to see that attention to detail, the idea of picking out that beautiful shop front bracket and the detailing of the building, just to try and use paint as part of the artwork of the facade improvements. And again, very, very nice to see some new guttering and the removal of that guttering along the dormer window there, the top floor, and the roof to the front has been redone. So that was very, very good. I'm delighted with that project. And Dan earlier mentioned about the importance of lift to a town, and the importance of a kind of very specific impact that is enabled by the HTI. And I think this building really, really embodies that perfectly. It has totally lifted that part of Castle Island town. It's a joy to pass it. So next slide, please, Ian. And these are just before and after shots. So just you'll see straight away the difference in the project. And the owner here is still in conversation with us. So that's really, really good. So next project, please, is number 118 Main Street. So this is at the other end of that very wide Main Street. It is called Hartnett's Bar, and this was a roofing project. Again, another protected structure, and again, there's a parapet here. There was water pouring in through the roof. The top floor of the building was suffering water ingress, and look, I suppose Often these buildings, if the top floor isn't in active use, it's hard to see problems when they arise. So I suppose another reason why it's really, really good to have buildings occupied. So next slide, please, Ian. So this was, as I said, a roofing project where the fibre cement slates were removed and a natural slate was put in instead. And again, you'll see an image there on the right-hand side of one of those beautiful stone chimney stacks. The next slide, please, Ian. And this is just some of the roofing work as it was underway. Yeah, it was kind of exciting to see this as it was happening, you know. So next slide, please. And this is the finished project. The image on the right-hand side is obviously from the street, so kind of hard to see, but the image on the left-hand side show close-up of that lovely slate. And it's really, really beautiful and, you know, easily visible from a distance, obviously. So it's very, very nice to be able to kind of have that very strong, important site, that focal building upgraded, and it's kind of like a very cheery hello when people come in from the Dublin or Limerick main roads into the town. So delighted with that project. And the next one now is 75 to 79 Main Street. This was a window upgrading project and a ground floor door to the shop front. And this is basically to support a new owner who's just bought the property to ensure that they are able to get in and use the upper floors of the building. So next slide, please. So this is the finished product. We had historic windows, you know, in terms of the design were made especially for the site. And yes, we have spoken to the owner about the render to the front elevation. But it's nice to see, and again, in conversation with the owner. So hopefully this will see some activity very, very soon. Next slide, please, Ian. And this is the final project, and I'm nearly finished. This is number 104 Main Street. This is probably one of my favourite projects. So this was an empty building on Main Street, not protected in the ACA area, and was bought and needed a little bit of love. So next slide, please. So this project was absolutely excellent. I must commend the project manager for their reporting. It was an absolute joy. So it entailed re-roofing. So the old slate was taken off. Timber repairs were made to the roofing timbers. New laths and felt was installed, and again, using the old slate as much as possible was put back on. Chimney repairs, again, those beautiful, beautiful limestone chimney stacks, those were repaired, cleaned up, joints repointed and looked after, and some cowls put on, again, to try and just, I suppose, stop the water pouring in when the building's fires aren't being lit. So a very, very nice project. Next slide, please, Ian. And it also included a redesign of the ground floor where the tiling was removed, the lime was re-rendered in lime the ground floor, and a new window was designed. And again, as I mentioned, a request for a quotation process had been undertaken. A conservation architect had been appointed. Design Form Architects Grade 1 from Cork did helped with the design with this, and the image on the bottom left just shows the kind of conversation with the owner about the design that they wanted and the design we wanted to see as well for the structure. And the image in the top right is of the day that the work was supposed to be finished for inspection by the local authority. And when I called to the site, the owner was very, very busy doing the final painting up job. And I thought it was just very, very sweet. It was lovely to meet her, and we had a great chat. And, you know, very, very nice just to see the care and love being put into the final touches of the project. So next slide, please, Ian. And this is just an image of the before and after, just to give you an idea. And I happened to find the Castle Island Tidy Towns Facebook page, who had actually been monitoring the development of this site and had a number of photographs of the works as they started in progression and the completed project. And lovely to see, I suppose, the impact on a community of the work that we do here in local authorities. It's humbling, I suppose, to think that what can be a very small project within the overall budget of a local authority can have a real significant impact on people's quality of lives for a community. So it's just sweet to see that. So next slide. That's it. Thank you very much. There are my contact details, my direct line and my email address if anyone's interested. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Victoria. That was brilliant. That was great, and it was just fantastic to see it in September, and in particular to be able to send people over to Listowel as well to see the impact of the kind of pride that they have on their paint schemes, on their shop fronts there, and the contribution it makes. Okay, I see we have one question, but I think we'll take that just before we take our break. We're a little bit behind, but I think we'll crack on. And you are now in for another treat. I don't know if many of you know Bantry Library in West Cork. It is a gem of a building. And we are going to hear from Raymond Higgins, who is an architect in Cork County Council, and Emer O'Brien, who is the county librarian. They're going to tell us about this amazing little building. So over to you, Raymond and Emer. Thank you very much. And we can see your slides, and they seem to be moving as well, so all looks good. Can we hear you, Raymond? Can you say something, Mike?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Perfect.
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, thank you. Today we're going to give you a presentation on Bantry Library and the external conservation works, including window replacement that was part of the Historic Towns Initiative 2023. My name is Ray Higgins, and I'm a Senior Executive Architect in Cork County Council, and my colleague Emer O'Brien is the County Librarian, who both of us worked together really to drive this project over the past year. Bantry, for those that don't know, is located in the heart of West Cork. It's along the Wild Atlantic Way, and it's a hub of the three peninsulas that surrounded Sheep's Head, Mizzen and the Beara Peninsula. The town itself is a discovery point along the Wild Atlantic Way, and it looks over Bantry Bay. And it's about 55 miles from Cork City, and the largest town in the area, providing commercial, retail, tourism, leisure facilities for locals and tourists alike. Bantry has a really thriving market on a Friday, and it showcases Cork's rich food scene and local food producers. The town itself, it's densely populated with about 18th and 19th century buildings framed by the mountains and Bantry Bay, and it has an attractive winding streetscape. The project location is Bantry Library. It lies in the heart of the town, and it's located on a slope overlooking Wolfetone Square, and it's on the site of a former mill. I suppose when you see the building, you'll see how interesting it is. And I liked this quote from The Buildings of Ireland by Frank Johann, and he refers to Bantry Library as an eccentric exercise in brutalism. Located in the West Cork town, its Corbusian-style gem reflects key international architectural movements of the 20th century. And I suppose that significance is also highlighted in the fact that it is a protected structure of architectural, artistic, historical and social value, and it's a National Inventory of Architectural Heritage and sits within the Architectural Conservation Area of Bantry. Cork County Council's development plan recognised this building as well to safeguard it for future generations. The building, well, it was designed by Pat McSweeney. He was the county architect of Cork County Council, and the timescale for the project ran over 10 years, 1962 to 1974. The plans were developed, went to public consultation, took about 4 years. Funding took another 4 years. And it was built then between 1972 and 1974, opening to the public in 1974. Estimated cost was £45,000, and inflation was high in them days as well, with a total cost of £60,000. The plans themselves, well, they were drawn by our architects department here in Cork County Council, and it's lovely to see such beautiful drawings developed in the public sector. The building itself, or the architect itself, is renowned for other buildings in Cork, including our own County Hall and Fermoy Library. So the building, well, the roof and walls are constructed in cast in situ concrete. The walls are sloped and the roof has a significant overhang. On the south facade, there's a fluted sweep of concrete, and it kind of resembles a Martello tower. And that facade is exposed with kind of texture, which included board marking to create a wonderful kind of texture to that facade. And I suppose most importantly, the river cascades around the building. And the windows are single pane and recessed into the wall, which creates a strong connection between the interior and the exterior of the building. And the front entrance, well, that has a columnar screen surround, which is similar to maybe standing stones, with a large projecting canopy over the entrance. These are some more images, just so you can get a feel for how exciting this building really is in Bantry. Its presence to the river and also its connection to the town itself. Internally, well, the building is a large space, except for a WC and a small office. The ceiling is double height over the main bookshelves, but lower in the reading areas, the children's area and the reference library area. And most importantly, there's a real captured view from the interior to the town through the large bow-shaped window. Internally, there's a really dramatic roof light circular cannons which are suspended at different levels, and they create this powerful visual effect and add the necessary natural lighting into the center of the building. And here's another image of them canyons coming in with the roof light from above. Moving on to Emer, maybe if you want to bring us through the next couple of slides just about the building's use. If you can hear us, Emer.
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
Lovely.
apologies. My internet is a little bit in and out today. Yeah, so it's a very busy library. As you can see there, it's you know, the photographs. It's busy for students, families, older people. It's really loved in the town, and it's very well engaged with whether it's schools or any groups in the area, and it's very busy with its groups. And I suppose it has a particular connection to the West Cork Literary Festival, and that is happening in July every year, and there's really a great engagement there. A huge amount of the activities of that festival actually happen in the library. So, you know, even in terms of when we were preparing for the funding for this application, we got a lot of letters of support from the town, from, you know, the Age Friendly Bantry and from the schools and from the West Cork Literary Festival. So it's a very well used and very well loved space.
Thank you, Emer. So we submitted our application back in January, and I suppose the focus of the application was really about the conservation of this building, the education of the importance of this building and the preservation of its use as a library. The application focused on external conservation works, including window replacement, and we were granted a heritage fund of €259,920, which was very much welcomed. In terms of the project, it focused, as I said, on the external of the building. We had 4 main elements, which was the specialist repair of the curved bow-leaded window. We had the replacement of all external windows and doors, repairs to the upper and lower roofs, which wasn't envisaged at the start of the project when we put in the application, but became necessary as we progressed, and the replacement of the existing roof lights. In terms of program, well, we put in the application in January. That was evaluated through the Heritage Council in February, and we awarded grant in early March. And once we got the grant letter, we had to mobilize quickly. We had to come up with a scope of service and a brief for the Grade 1 conservation architects that we needed to appoint to support us on this project. And we appointed the design team in early April. We then carried out a number of surveys, we got access to the roof, and we prepared the tender documents, which then were issued through the tender process, e-tenders in June. Or it was at the end of June. The tenders were returned just after the builders' holidays in August, and an appointment of the contractor was in September. Works commenced in October, and the project is still ongoing, and we expect to be complete in mid-February. In terms of the project management team, well, it's critical, I would say, to get the right team assembled with the appropriate experience to conduct these works. We're very lucky we have a very skilled in-house architects department. So we have QS and architectural technician skills inside. But we also appointed a Grade 1 conservation architect who had support from Cook Architects, Dermot Harrington and Oisin Craig, to lead on the development of the design for this project. We managed it and we appointed Griffin Brothers who as the main contractor in PSCS, and Gavin McCarthy from DMCA was the PSDP. Griffin's had a number of specialist conservation specialists brought in, but Palmer Conservation were the glazing specialists, which were a real key stakeholder in terms of delivering this project. I suppose our approach was for simple and effective replacement of failed elements of the building, so the impact would be minimal and would assist with the maintaining the continued use of the building as a library. When we got started, we arranged for a safe scaffolding access to roof level to allow for people to carry out the works up there. The roof itself, well, the asphalt roof was installed 49 years ago. And as with an exposed roof in a coastal location with no surface protection, the UV exposure had resulted in numerous cracks and blisters forming, allowing water to ingress into the building. It was at this investigation survey stage that we realized that we had no choice but to tackle this roof as part of the project to stop the water from ingressing into the building. And these were agreed by the client to proceed as was added the right time to do it when we were doing the other works. When you look at the kind of roof, we had to create temporary perimeter guarding for health and safety reasons to allow people up there. There was no secure ways of working otherwise. And then it was about analysing the roof, and the roof itself, well, it's initial board mark cast in situ concrete. That's the initial layer. It's got a kind of a sandwich of insulation between 260 mil and 500 mil, and then there's another layer of concrete. So it's a giant sandwich with concrete as at the top and bottom. And our works here were really to clean down the roof, make some small repairs to where the damage was, and then we applied a brand new roof felt covering, fire rated, on top. These are some of the works ongoing, and with the roofing build finish, we went for a system. A system guarantees further guarantees to us and the client that that it will last for future generations. So these are some images. You can see the works happening, the dressing of the roof lights up, making sure that it was all fully sealed. The roof lights were removed. And this is just some images. You can see that the condition of the roof lights. They're polycarbonate. These wouldn't have been the original. They were probably replaced 10, 15 years ago. But again, we're at the end of their life in that short time sprint. And I suppose polycarbonate creates a different type of light into the space, and it was quite dull inside as a result. So we decided to upgrade the roof lights, mainly because we wanted to improve the energy performance of the building as well. So we went with a glazed roof light, and I probably would be more sympathetic to the original design, and it would give increased thermal performance. So these were bespoke roof lights, circular and square, across the roof, and all dressed in and sealed correctly to stop any water from entering the building at this point. These are some of the finished images, and you can see how it has dramatically improved the roofscape visual from street level, because this is looked over from higher up the hill, but also internally, and how it has improved the light internally, given consistent light and beautiful kind of reinforcement of that feature that we spoke about earlier. In terms of the lower roofs, well, these obviously have been protected by the upper roof and are not in as bad a condition, but we also wanted to make sure that they were fully repaired and sealed. So we cleaned them down, and we created a new top membrane over it. This was obviously carried out with appropriate trade skilled in the area. It was a confined space, so that's very important from a health and safety perspective. The head height working in that was very limited. And these are some images of the completed kind of membrane on the lower roofs. And I suppose one of the most important significant items of the building is the bow window, the leaded bow window. It's such a beautiful addition to this building, and it was really important that we carefully conserved this. The detail of it had failed in many ways. It was air leakage was huge, lots of drafts coming through. The saddle bars behind the leaded cames, they were all rusted, failing. The actual copper ties were broken. Some glazing elements had been repaired over the years where maybe it was broken or such, but they again weren't installed maybe as per the correct conservation principles. But overall, after 50 years, this leaded window had come to the end of its life, and it needed a lot of tender loving care. We can see here is just some of the images, and there's just even the scale of deterioration on that saddle bars there with the rust. So you can also see the impact of the water ingressing into the building through the gaps in the windows and also from the roof above. It's just really impacting that and causing all kinds of problems to the concrete structure, which we just need to stop. We sealed up the window when we first got in. We created a hoarding. We did keep the building fully operational as a library throughout these works. So it was important just to make sure from a health and safety perspective that the interior was protected, but also that it was sheltered to carry out this specialist conservation repairs. These were carried out by Palmer Conservation, excellent tradesmen, and focused in on Heritage Council guidelines for quality materials being used and quality long-lasting job. Glenn Palmer is the lead on this. It's fascinating to kind of, as an architect, to kind of sit with them on site and talk through the detail, and you learn so much really, which is great. The panels were all removed on site and brought back to a workshop where they could be put back together. The physical structure was cleaned and treated for rust and repaired, and the full on elements then were brought back. So with the curve and with the kind of regular shape, it was done in phases, 3 phases starting from the ground up. Once you finished the first phase, you could then take templates for the next. It's all based on the saddle bars, and you kind of do cartoon kind of graphics of the panels and then use the lead cames to match that. So it's really interesting. Once it was put back in, then it was kind of repaired with a kind of a lime mortar just where it's embedded into the concrete, and that allows any moisture that's trapped in there just to escape. And you can see some of the conservation remedial works there through these photographs. The new copper ties then back onto the saddle bars, and some of the second phase here going in with the middle glass, and that leaves us the last one just to be measured on site. And this is an image of the window looking out onto the town, which is really spectacular. The other item of the project was the windows, and really the windows in the building were again at the end of their lifespan, failing in many areas. They're not properly sealed and allowing gaps to the external. Unfortunately, many of them were cracked, and even for safety reasons, the library had to board up one window, which was creating a very dull and dark space for a library to operate in, and any moisture that was coming in was also causing problems. And this building had a very poor BER rating of F. It's probably the lowest you could get. So we really needed to make sure that the building could be upgraded from an energy perspective as well. Here are some of the problems that were in situ when we applied. And you can see water ingress at the top where the word and seal, cracks in the window directly out onto the river, a health and safety issue, and then being boarded up for safety concerns. And this is just the impact that it's having. You can see people trying to do a project here or study or even work in that space, and it's just not lit. It's all dependent on some artificial additional lighting. The doors themselves, some doors had been replaced over time. Non-sympathetic UPVC was used, not fully accessible as well from an access point of view, and the fire egress. So we're using this opportunity to make sure that we can improve accessibility and consistently have windows that are all matching and the original kind of intent of the building. So we're improving the U value of the project with the windows and draft proofing, and trying to get the building down to an air permeability of less than 5, which will really help with the energy usage for the library going forward. The design of the windows and doors were drawn up by our architectural team, and they then were liaised with the specialist glazer who was providing them. Samples were marked up. These were all approved by the conservation architect. And then once that was all agreed, they went into production. And the lead-in time, which we probably didn't envisage at the start of this application, was 12 weeks from sign-off, which really kind of delayed slightly the program of delivery, but we're still on track to have the project and the windows installed between the 12th and 18th of February. In terms of lessons learned, I suppose we're very fortunate to have a very skilled set of disciplines in-house in the Cork County Council architects team, and this is supported very much from our heritage officer and our conservation officer, but making sure that you get the right team assembled is critical when you tackle these types of projects. One of the main challenges with the HTI funding is the timescale of the project. As Victoria said, you need to have the project finished by and invoiced by November for the funding that you have applied for. And it's also really important, I think, to think about the materials that you're proposing for your project and the long lead-in time that may currently be happening in the construction industry. No one could have envisaged maybe at the start of last year 12 weeks for delivery of windows, but we've had, you know, unprecedented delays in materials due to, you know, wars and other things that are happening across the supply chain. So it does make an impact, and you just need to be flexible, but also maybe think of what you're actually applying for in advance in terms of how you can manage that risk. As Victoria said, also, we had a Heritage Week events to celebrate the project and the HTI funding. We had 2 events. We had a talk in the library on the 19th of August, which was advertised on the Heritage Council website locally, in the press, and on all our social media across Cork County Council. But we also developed an exhibition about the building, educating about the architects, the architectural style, the construction of the building, and the importance of it as a kind of a 21st century modernist building in the middle of Bantry town in Cork. So these are some images of some of the talks on site and the engagement from the public. And this February, the building will celebrate its 50th anniversary. And I suppose that's really important in terms of continuing that education and focus on this building so that we can make sure that we fulfill that goal that we set ourselves. And that exhibition that we did as a second event was displayed during Heritage Week in Bantry Library, but also went on till the end of September. And that is now going to tour all the libraries across the Cork region for the 50th anniversary, and that will educate further outside of Bantry the importance of some of our built heritage, and just some of the talks that happen in the building. Again, just shows the engagement from the public. This is some of the boards from that exhibition. It's just beautiful imagery just to see how it was designed, constructed, some of the beautiful influences, the architectural drawings, and just the way they constructed, which was so unique for its time back in the early 1970s. and the images there when it first opened. It was such a unique building. And still is. In terms of the overall project is 539,735, and that important 33 cent, and the Heritage Council grant was 259,920. And I suppose we just want to say thank you to the Heritage Council, because without your funding, it wouldn't have given the focus to this building. It has now given a new lease of life to this library. It has stopped the water ingress. It will improve the actual thermal performance of the building, making it more comfortable for staff and public, and will allow us to continue the full-on restoration conservation of this building internally. The building needs a brand new rewire, new plumbing, needs upgrades that would be required with a modern library, and that focus is now on it. So we'll use this opportunity to continue seeking that funding that it desperately needs just to finish it and celebrate it in its full glory. So from me, I just want to say thank you to the Heritage Council. It's lovely to have the opportunity to speak and give you an insight of what we do in Cork County Council Architects Department. And thank you again to everybody who's listened. We're happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you for me as well.
Thank you, Emer. Yeah.
Thank you, Emer. Thank you, Raymond, for a fantastic presentation on an amazing building and a great project. And it's great to see the work of Cork County Council on buildings like this. I should mention that one of the projects funded last year as well via Cork County Council was a regeneration plan for Macroom Village, or Macroom Town, which was really good as well. It just didn't make it onto the programme, but it was really, really interesting. Have we questions there, Amanda?
We have one question from earlier. I think it was when Moira was speaking from Monaghan County Council. Now, I think presenters have already addressed this. It's about how was work tendered? Was it open tender or restricted process? But I think that has been answered in the presentations. But one question, add on to that question is, and if anyone from the panel would like to answer it, was cost control a challenge during the works?
Or even Victoria, if you had any insight on that.
Yeah, I suppose cost was an issue, particularly, I suppose, when the finer detail and methodology was being approved by the conservation architect. So there would have been, I suppose, the possibility of cost overrun at that point. But I found, similarly to Ray, that it was the delivery of materials to site and the delays, the actual of that side of it, I think, was the biggest challenge. Very tight time scale to get the work done. We're kind of constantly going against the clock. For me, that was the biggest challenge in Castle Island. So I think that the tendering process was run, I suppose, individually by the building owners, but it was the actual delay of getting material to site once the detail was finalised what was the biggest challenge.
Okay.
Thanks, Victoria. And just a bit of congratulations to Raymond and Emer for their project from Sligo. Siobhan there, the Heritage Officer, says, a stunning building and a wonderful conservation project. Congratulations to everyone involved. So
thank
you. That's all the questions for now, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. We said we give people a screen break. We've been at this 2 hours now, so why don't people grab a cup of coffee or a stretch? And it's now if we come back about 11:35, and we'll go again. We have a couple of interesting presentations from Owen and Carlo, Wendy and Jalique, and Joe and Colette in Ramelton, and then Amanda and I will give a recap on the HTI 2024. So if we see you back again at 11:35. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Testing.
Okay. We have Owen back. Looks like it's just you and me, Owen.
Are we the only ones here? Okay, Ian.
I don't think so. I don't
That
think so.
suits me. As long as you don't record.
Okay, we still have 56 people, so
Grand.
well, they're all popping back up now.
Hi guys.
Yeah. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hi, Wendy. I just see you there. So our next speaker, we're a little bit behind, but we said we'd give ourselves a screen break. Is Owen Sullivan, Heritage Officer with Carlow County Council, and he's going to talk about Carlow Town Heritage-led Regeneration Plan. So over to you, Owen.
Okay. Good morning, Ian and Amanda. First off, thank you very much for the invitation here to give what I'm kind of in my head. I was thinking, how do you encapsulate months and months of hard work, as all the previous speakers have done, in such a kind of a short time frame? So, without kind of apologies, what I'm going to do is kind of give it a broad brush stroke in terms of the approach we took and the consultants we engaged with in producing a heritage-led regeneration plan for Carlow Town with generous funding from the Heritage Council to make that happen. So I'm going to try sharing my screen. If it doesn't work, I know Amanda has a backup. So I'm hoping you guys might be able to see this. Are we in business?
We can see it on.
Okay.
Can you move to presenter view?
1 second now. Are we in business?
No.
We can see it, but it's not the presenter view just yet.
I beg your pardon, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Am I wonderful with the old technology?
If you go right down to the bottom right hand corner,
Yes, yeah.
and you see the image, the icon just to the left of the minus from decreasing the screen. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no, that's still presenter view.
Sorry, guys.
Just try this. Ooh.
No.
Try display settings at the top.
Do you know what, Ian, if you don't want to, I think you guys have a PDF of it. Might we do that and just rather
Okay,
be burning into your time on that?
I have that. If you stop sharing then. Carla, there we go.
Sorry about that, guys. Apologies.
All right. Yeah, just bear with me.
Great way to start off, isn't it, after a tea break?
Yeah, we're doing okay. Now, how does that look?
It makes sense to me. Hopefully everybody else. Okay, look, we'll
Yeah,
get started.
perfect.
Thanks, everybody,
Okay.
and apologies for my Luddite approach to doing this
No,
presentation.
we're doing okay. So look,
Okay.
Owen, do you want to fire ahead?
Yeah,
And
no,
just tell me when you want to move slides.
okay, I will indeed. Thanks, Ian. What I would say, just I'm going to, as I said, a broad brush, I suppose, approach to the production of what we called the Historic Towns Initiative Heritage-Led Regeneration Plan for Carlow Town, for Carlow. So I suppose what I'd say in the context of this is I approach this, and I've made this point to many people in the sense of Carlow is and was a medieval town. The fabric of the medieval town in terms of the wall, we don't actually know where it is. There's no upstanding remains of it. And over the years, I suppose, archaeological excavations have been carried out in certain parts of the town, which were all catalogued in the report. And any sort of groundworks that were done were often monitored, and still no evidence of the town wall. So we do know it's there. We just don't know where it is. And that's always kind of the crux of when you look at Carlow Town. And that's always the question. And it actually generates huge interest. And it's often come back in terms of the public consultation of where is this town wall. The other salient point, I suppose, of Carlow is the lovely Carlow Castle. 100, I think it was 1850s, 1840s, something like that. The castle was actually blown up by a medical person in the town at the time, but there's still substantial elements of the castle still there. So I suppose we have in Carlow, we have the medieval town and we have the medieval castle, going back to Earl Marshall, and with an O'Neill connection previous to that. But very often in terms of the castle, it's kind of hidden in plain sight, and it's a little bit like the medieval town of Carlow. And I've often said this to people, it is hidden in plain view. We just don't know where it is. And I suppose when somebody, one of the people at one of the municipal districts asked me a question and said, look, kind of what's the end game? And I kind of thought, well, we obviously want to get people living back in these buildings. We want to conserve the buildings, but we also want to be telling the story of Carlow through creative ways of doing this that are in tune with the flavour of the town. But also, I suppose, I made the point that what I would love is its success would be that the people who are in the businesses in the town, when their customers and visitors come into the town and they're doing business there, that actually they will be the go-to person. They'll have that conversation of what this building is and maybe how significant it is and what's the neighbouring properties and where the architectural conservation area is. And I think if we could get to that stage, we'd be very successful. And I suppose that's what this plan, I'm hoping we'll do well with it. We can start pushing that agenda. So as I mentioned, the main facets of the town, I suppose, that we have the castle and the town wall, and we have a central area which is called the architectural conservation area. Now, what I've done for this presentation is I've just taken kind of screen grabs of a very complex or very good report. Our consultants were Urban Scale Interventions. They were, I shouldn't say it, but they were really, really brilliant. They were like a breath of fresh air dealing with them. So I suppose just in terms of the town, as I mentioned, medieval town, later on the capital of Ireland, a thriving town throughout the time. So one of the main things of Carlow is also that we have an educational connection. So everyone would know we have SETU as what was a technical college, now university status. But we also have, in the mid 1700s, we have the creation of St. Patrick's College. And St. Patrick's College is located in what we call the Cultural Quarter, which would have the presentation building, the convent, which is now house of the library and the county museum. We have the visual arts centre very close by, and then we have Carlow Cathedral as well. So that is our hub. We'll get onto that in a few minutes. Can I have the next slide, please, Ian? Thanks. So I suppose I put up this building because it's one of my favourite in Carlow, I must admit. I put this up because there is a legacy of huge interest in heritage in Carlow town over many, many years. And I think it's replicated very nicely here in whoever did this, I don't know. But a couple of years ago, they went and made a music sheet out of a gable of a building and put up a very well-known song, The Old Stones of Carlow, and put it up on that building. That is in the architecture conservation area right outside the library. It's very fitting, and yet some people will kind of say, oh, that should be taken down. It doesn't really suit there. And other people love it. And I think it's brilliant because when you look at Carlow as you travel around it, you see that the actions have been taken that really reflect the variety of what is heritage of the town. It's just, we never really kind of packaged that way. Can I have the next slide, please, Irene? So in terms of the process, we engaged Urban Scale Interventions to work for us and produce a fit for purpose, I suppose, regeneration plan for Carlow town. It was a big undertaking. Carlow is a big town. It's got huge historical depth in it. But also, I suppose, we had an advantage because we have one of the lecturers that I mentioned, Carlow College, is Mary Murphy, and she is working on the Historic Towns Initiative of Carlow at the moment. So she was brought into a steering group that we formed when we started off this process. We also brought in our county architect, we brought in our senior planner, we brought in the likes of the Carlow Historical and Archaeological Society, because I'm a great believer in a consultation group working with myself and the consultants on this. The more eyes on these things, the better. I loved, I suppose, their approach that they took. I suppose it really was what if, what was, what is, and what if. Going back, what was, back to the medieval times, what if, what is 2023. This is what this plan is doing. It's a snapshot of all the built heritage, the cultural heritage, and people's responses and reactions to that. And what if is, I suppose, now we've done the plan, and thankfully there are funding streams available. It's what can we achieve in the future. Now, I should also say that central to this is also the fact that we have Carlow 2040, and a huge amount of work has been put in by the Carlow County Council in the last 2 or 3 years, producing the document Carlow 2040 with very extensive public consultation in terms of what did Carlow Town want or aspire to for regeneration. And one of the key points I was making to various different people around the town, the business interests, indeed the people in the county council themselves, a whole range of stakeholders, was that this heritage-led regeneration plan is to complement and dovetail with the larger regeneration plan. I suppose we just felt it was a fantastic opportunity to showcase the heritage and complement it. And what I'd say is we have our regeneration officer in hand. There's great lines of communication on the back of that consultation group starting, and that's continuing on. So I suppose in the future, these conversations are already being had of where we go next. And there's great anticipation and excitement amongst the councillors when it was brought to the municipal district. And they were very, very happy to hear it and hear what's going on, and are hugely supportive of it. If I could have the next slide there, please, Ian. Just in terms of public consultation, I suppose, extensive consultation. What I really loved, and one of the things, this is what I loved for the consultants, they brought in a board and they had a series of questions. But we used, and great thanks to Carlow County Library, the Central Library here, because they allowed us leave up the board, and we had little stickers where people could come in and put their suggestions. So instead of kind of giving the questionnaire, which we did, putting it in the newspaper to have the public consultations, and were very well attended, we also had kind of children coming in and putting up little notes and little things on it. And I thought that was really nicely, because you can see center of the screen there, lack of facilities and things to do for younger people. So that was really one of the things that struck home of what can we do to get young people appreciating what this town is. How can we give people who live in and travel into the town of Carlow a sense that you're in a medieval town? And there's a couple of things that we've identified that we can do, and I'll get to that. And I think it's quite exciting times for it. But also, I mean, Guardian Bio do an awful lot with the biodiversity in the town. It's very much so convent-based and community-based actions. But there was huge input, and also huge knowledge of what's in Carlow. I mean, one of the things that came out was actually somebody was saying about the stories that kind of bodies and ghosts associated with was the jail in Carlow at the time. You know, so all these things, I think people kind of had these as talking points, but never really went, oh, that could be a project in itself that we can build into this. If I could get the next slide, please, Ian. In terms of built heritage, I suppose I should also say, in terms of Heritage Week, I know a couple of people have mentioned this, and obviously enough, we were curious, we were keen to do something Heritage Week. I kind of took a different approach in terms of pulling people together, because there was a part of me that I wish I had trackers on them. I didn't, I hate to say, probably not allowed, but what we did was we put up a series of corryboard signs at salient points around what was the known corners or extrapolated corners of the medieval town where the gatehouses would have been. And we put up an information board with a map of Carlow showing where the postulated wall of the town would have been, with a little bit of an explanation of the significance of that spot, and also something of the built heritage in the area where you stood there and looked at it. Now, we don't know the numbers, we didn't track them, as I say, but I do know over the weeks and months after that has taken place, there has actually been really positive response, and actually people have come into the library and said, will you do that again? So there is opportunity to do this. And the corryboard, what we're going to do is basically each year we'll just print off Heritage Week with a new year on it. So they're going to be recycled and reused for a couple of years before we update them. But I thought it was a really nice thing to do, to kind of get it to the ground up and get people talking about it. In terms of the built heritage, this is one of the, I mean, look, there's so many, come to Carlow. I feel like I'm the tourism officer. It really is a standing town. But we have the architecture conservation area. This is just one of the several beautiful shop fronts on Dublin Street in Carlow. It's lovely. It's in very much so need of conservation. What I'd say though is, very often what's really struck me as a heritage officer, and it's because I'm looking at the BH, the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, the Historic Structures Fund, and I administer those. Very often you can walk along the street and the buildings look good, but it's actually when you go in the back of them that you see the kind of the cracks and the damage to the roofs and the guttering and stuff like that. So I mean, I'm seeing this kind of coming through, that people are applying now, because the word has gone out that there is funding in Carlow for the Built Heritage Investment Scheme on the back of the regeneration plan. There's more conversation being had. There was a bit of vacuum without heritage officer there for a few years. That's now being filled and more applications are coming in. If I could have next slide, please, Ian. And then also just another view, I suppose, very active county council in terms of putting up I suppose for diversification of our society. You can see the very clever use of colour along with the pedestrian crossing. You can also see the buildings out the back there. Some clearly one or two have been boarded up, but they are actually working on that at the moment, which is great to bring it back into use. But we also have a legacy in terms of the cultural significance of a lot of these buildings, whereby there's a really strong, there's a connection with George Bernard Shaw. He never lived in the town, but he inherited several properties in the town, and I suppose effectively gifted them to Carlow County Council. I suppose that's why we have the visual, which is named after George Bernard Shaw, our main theatre in the cultural quarter as well. So there are these little things that I suppose we don't really sell as a unique point about the connection with George Bernard Shaw, But that can be brought into, and that's what I'd love to see being brought into the cultural significance of these buildings as people are moving back into them. And I do think it is already happening. And that's really what we want to get into that space in our main areas. If I could have the next slide, please, Ian. Just in terms of, I suppose, I should have put a map on this earlier for you, but you can see the brown area there. In the central area of that, you'll see the highest point, which goes up to the courthouse up at the north, the highest northern point of the brown area. And you'll see there you have kind of effectively like a N shape on the screen there. And that's our architectural conservation area where a lot of the attention is on the buildings. There are quite a few of the buildings are vacant. Some of them are certainly in need of quite a bit of work, but they are being addressed through the regeneration team. And I do know now that there's more contact, that at least I'll be having more conversations with them about the heritage aspects of these buildings and how we portray that and how we protect it and look after it. I should have also said the castle, if you look to the left of the image you're seeing there, the map, you'll see the River Barrow, and the castle was just down there very close to the River Barrow. So we have the castle over near the river, and then the town growing kind of akin to the castle. But again, we still need to know where those walls are. They'll show up by accident one day, probably. If you could have the next slide, please, Ian. So I suppose going back just, I suppose, to the context of what we were trying to do, as I said, the Carlow 2040, huge amounts of public consultation. Funding is there. The regeneration workers will be starting, and we have a regeneration officer who's doing Trojan work. But in terms of the Carlow 2040, what we were complementing was we were looking at these areas that they had already identified. So you can see on the screen there, I mentioned the cultural quarter. You can see that's to the, I suppose you have Town Centre in the middle there. Over to the top right, you have the cultural quarter. That's where the library sits, the museum, the cathedral, the art centre, or the visual centre. We have the civic quarter, which would be the beautiful courthouse of Carlow, and also a lot of the administrative buildings and the county council buildings as well. Then you have the recreation area down near the River Barrow, which has huge plans in terms of starting to use the river and bringing people in onto the river, canoeing, stuff like that. And they have a really, really good clubhouse, existing one. And then I suppose we also then have what they call the historic quarter as well, which is kind of in around the town and incorporating down into the castle area. So I suppose for me, a lot of the focus would be on, we're very much taking a whole town approach. We didn't want to look at just the ACA. We wanted to open it out and engage with as many people as we could. If I could have the next slide there, please, Ian. I suppose as part of the town health check, what I thought was really interesting was some of the things that came out. Very often people don't get a sense of this, but there's actually a really, really strong cohort of people in Carlow who are native Irish speakers and will speak commonly in Irish, which is lovely to hear, and actually kind of catches a little bit unawares at times in Carlow, but there's a really, really strong sense of the language in the town here. And that nicely came through when they did the public consultation, when people were coming in and chatting, these things were being teased out. Now, that was the expertise of the consultants involved, as we can all imagine. They were asking the right questions and they were capturing all that data as well. And it was also reflected in the subsequent focus group, the meetings they had as well. If you could go to the next slide there, please, Ian. So again, I suppose when I originally met I suppose with the steering group and with the consultants, I suppose I was always kind of looking, going, well, we need to be thinking naturally of in terms of opportunity areas. The challenge, I suppose, in Carlow, as I say, the challenge is how do you start to reflect and give a sense of the medieval town in Carlow? Because as you travel through it, it is hidden, it is there. We don't know what the fabric of a lot of our buildings are. As work will be done, I'd like to see that starting to be, and it will be part of it in terms of assessing what is in the buildings before any works are done on them. But also we have a whole series of very small little laneways around Carlow. Now there's not a huge amount of them, but there's one called Charlotte Street, which is just in the central area of the architectural conservation area. And if you walk up that today, it looks like just an ordinary street. It's got the usual problem with, I mean, where do people put their wheelie bins for the businesses? They're all grouped up on that street so much so you I can't say it's difficulty getting past them, but there's several of them there. There's no option. It's practical. It's a town. You know, they have to have their litter collected and stored somewhere. But in behind one of those buildings, there's actually what was a bicycle shop that's only closed in the last couple of months. The gentleman retired, and there's the fabric of, I think it's one of the old, I think it was actually probably the Quaker Meeting House is based in there in Carlow. So again, there's these little tenets of information that if you're looking in the right place, you'll see it and you know it's there, but it's hidden in the back of the building. And that's the kind of story we need to get out, that so that when you're walking on that street, you get a sense, or you have some way of knowing what's there. Apart from just the conversation. I mean, when I start off by saying, I think our success would be if people in the village, in the town, were talking about these things. If any of you are ever in Carlow, go into Adams. It's a lovely coffee shop on Dublin Street. Some of the Heritage officers were there 2 years ago. We did their training, and actually they live this. When you go in, they talk about the building, they talk about the changes that happened and why they did it. And it's just, I really kind of went, gosh, it really captures a lot of what we need to be. If you could give me the next slide there, please, Ian, thank you. So I suppose just in terms of, as I mentioned, kind of the overall vision of the consultants, what they did, they broke it down very nicely into the assets, the connections, the place, and the stories and events. And I suppose what I really liked was they were very keen to look at what was done with their 2030 regeneration plan, and to try to complement that. So the next few slides you're going to see, one in particular is actually complementing it very, very nicely. So if you could give me the next slide there, please, Ian. These are just two of the shots. Now, what I would say is the plan is done. It's just one or two little minor tweaks, and then I'll be bringing it to the for adoption by the County Council, and happy to share this. And hopefully you'll see the fruits of the labours over the years coming ahead. But just one of the points they were making, I suppose, in terms of the streets, the lighting on the streets. I mean, there's obviously a huge focus with the local enterprise office looking at, and the Chamber of Commerce looking at nighttime trade. We have a student population, but I suppose they were very cleverly kind of coming up with proposals in terms of looking at how we light the streets and how we might light up certain buildings, which I think are very, very relevant, as long as it's done obviously with the climate change piece in mind as well. And also, as I mentioned, the aspects of the streets and the small laneways. You know, we have several in Carlow. What we need to do is, in terms of connectivity, is kind of encourage people to go up, but make that space interesting and lit up or informative in a creative way that'll bring them up there and then bring them on into the next way to walk through the town. And we can see that there are ways of doing this, and hopefully we'll get them in over the next few years. Ian, if I could have the next slide, please. I think we're pretty close to finishing off on that one, actually. So just on the top right there, I suppose another aspect, which I thought was really, really nice. One, and I'd say many of you who have dealt with these larger projects more than I have will say this, but obviously enough in a town, parking is always going to be an issue. A lot of people would feel, look, we can't get rid of on-street parking. But what I think the consultants have kind of come up with a very clever idea of just, if we could take a small number of those parking spaces in key locations and introduce parklets, I think they're referring to them as, where you enhance biodiversity. We have a biodiversity officer just started. I can't wait to get stuck into stuff with him in Carlow. But I mean, there are those opportunities, and I think we really have to think creatively of in Carlow where we can introduce the biodiversity in the green infrastructure and the way they're looking at pollination in Carlow. There's already this idea that we're trying to produce corridors to enhance biodiversity for the insects and all the animals to kind of travel through the town in a sense. And we just did the survey under Local Biodiversity Action Fund. We did the survey of swifts in Carlow, so we're going to start bringing that into the planning framework and starting to raise awareness of where the swifts are. I did that, I suppose, because anytime we get conservation works coming in, I was painfully aware that last year I didn't know where the swifts were. Now at least we can identify where they were. And just the bottom right there of the screen, that's just one of the images. I say just, I love the way just, I mean, there's a huge amount of work in it, but that's down what they're calling the Pembroke area. It's down beside the river, down from Carlow Castle, and part of the regeneration plan is obviously enough to get that back into an area where people are living with suitable accommodation, ideally for maybe students mixed in there and people to live there in a thriving town. But I suppose then the point they were saying was what we need to do in terms of the regeneration was how do we get people and make them aware of where they're living there, that there's a significance of the industrial heritage on the river, and how do we communicate that with them? You know, so there are very, very clever actions. Now, as I say, I can share the plan with you, but I mean, there are many, many actions that are very achievable, that really reflect, I think, what the County Council would want and are happy with, and also certainly the people around the town, because all credit to the consultants, they did a fantastic job on the public consultation stage, which is a really key aspect of that. And in a weird way, you know it was working, because when I was sitting in the room and people were coming in, I was going, oh, I really hope they'd show up, you know, and that was great. So I think, if I'm right, Ian, I think that's the end of us, if I'm correct.
Yeah, sure.
Well, look,
last slide.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. And I suppose, look, is there anything else I'd say just in terms of the overall approach? No, I think I'm just looking at my sheet of paper here. I think I've covered it all. I just, as I say, for Carlo, it really is a sense of there's a lot of strands to the heritage of Carlo that are hidden, and I do think we just need to start pulling them out there, and amalgamating the stories with the built structure, with the built heritage, and telling that story. And hopefully tourists will start coming in and grabbing it. So thanks. Hopefully I didn't go too long over time. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Owen. That was great, brilliant presentation on Carlo, and we really look forward to seeing the actions coming out of it and being implemented over the next couple of years. So thanks, Owen. Our next speaker is Wendy Bagnall. She's the Senior Planner in Meath County Council, and she's going to tell us about Duleek Heritage-led Regeneration Plan. So great to see you again, Wendy. Over to you.
Great to see you too, Ian, and thank you so much for the invitation. I found this morning very, very interesting. I'm a bit envious, though, of Victoria and Maura, because they're at a stage that I would like us to be at. So my presentation is really about the first stage, the plan making stage. So I'll attempt now to share the screen, and we'll just hope that it will work for me.
Yeah, we can see that. And
let me just get to the piece I want to get to now, which is this bit. Now,
perfect.
Can everyone see that and hear me?
Yeah.
Great, let's go. So you see what you're looking at now is a lovely picture of the centre of Duleek. And I suppose I'm conscious after Owen's presentation, what I'm talking about is a town that has a population of about 4,500 people. So a different scale to Carlow. And I suppose we felt that the HTI was a good fit for the challenges facing Duleek. For the scale of the town, we've had very positive experiences with the Heritage Council on HTI projects in Kells. So we felt this was the way to go. And as a result of that, we made our application for funding, and we got our funding for that to prepare a plan for Duleek as a first phase. And obviously we would hope to follow in the footstep of other local authorities and use the plan as a basis for further applications for funding. So we appointed Sheridan Woods architects and town planners to prepare the plan, which was great, and they've obviously worked in Monaghan and other places on that experience. We benefited from that. So the aim of our plan is to put in place a positive roadmap for the heritage-led regeneration of Duleek to help it fulfil its potential as an historic town. So just for those of you who may not be aware, as you see, Duleek is very much in the centre of everything in terms of between Navan and Drogheda. It's in the Boyne Valley. Our new Boyne Valley National Park is close to it. Newgrange and the World Heritage Site, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, is close to it also. So it's in a really good location, particularly from a tourism perspective, which was something that our consultation indicated the residents of Duleek are very keen to make a little bit more of that, but more of that anon in the presentation. So I suppose, why did we pick Duleek? Meath has a population of over 225,000 people. So we have a lot of towns. Our urban structure is quite strong. So why did we pick Duleek? Well, I suppose it's not on the slide, but it's worth me saying that the last time the local authority really did any sort of a plan of any substance for Duleek was in 2009. So it was somewhere that both the elected representatives and the residents had been asking us for some time to take a look at. And I suppose we felt that this was a good fit for a job that we needed to do in Duleek. So it's a very historic town. It's in the east of Meath. It dates back to, it's an early Christian monastic settlement. It's one of the oldest sites in Ireland. It has a very, very interesting history that our plan details in the first part of it. It has a rich supply of natural, social and built heritage. So we've lots of material to work on. But as we've discovered this morning, in common with, sadly, with most Irish towns, it's got vacancy, it's got dereliction. Maintenance and management of buildings is a serious issue. Poor finish of the public realm, which negatively impacts on the local environment, and I suppose also negatively impacts on, you know, how the citizens feel about their town. One of the, I suppose, I feel with this, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons, Ian, you would have liked myself and Owen to speak, is to give others maybe who are thinking about using the HTI as a method of funding a plan. The location that you select to do the plan, it does need to have, I feel, a strong and active community base. You have to have a group of, you have to have interested people that will get involved in the plan making process and will embrace it. Otherwise, it will be more difficult to deliver a plan. So there are opportunities based on the issues we identified. There are opportunities for plan-led heritage-focused improvements to the town. So that's why we went with the HTI, the heritage-led regeneration plan funded by the HTI. So this is our land use zoning objectives map for Duleek, extracted from the Meath County Development Plan. There's no local area plan for Duleek. There won't be a local area plan for Duleek. The policies and objectives that govern planning decisions in Duleek are based on those in the county development plan. And as you see, the large green area to the top is the commons in Duleek, and the green area to the bottom is an area of high amenity zoned along the River Nanny, which is down there where my cursor is at the moment. And that piece, that piece to the south was of great interest to us in terms of our regeneration plan. So this map then shows you the boundary of the study area for the plan, essentially focusing on the main street, on some key heritage buildings along there. The green in Duleek is very important. There's a lime tree there that is said to have been planted after the Battle of the Boyne. So this is our centre, this is our monastic site. So that we focus on the key kind of central nodes. In modern day Duleek, this is the sort of a commercial hub, and this is a commercial hub down here. So we tried to bring both of those into it. But as you will see, in common again with most Irish towns, in the 90s and early 2000s, quite a lot of residential development on the outskirts. And the heart of the town has suffered with similar to all of the other towns we've heard about this morning, occupancy rates from a residential perspective declining. One of the interesting things, I suppose, about County Meath that is slightly different maybe to other places, our level of vacancy in buildings is quite low. And in the general sense, if our buildings are vacant, it's because there are issues with ownership or some land reg, or there is some issue that is preventing that building from coming back into use, because we have a very active economy here. So that's a thing that I'll get to later on in the presentation as being identified as an issue. So this is our very simple. Sometimes I feel with these processes, it's best to keep it as simple as possible. And this is our simple process: understanding Duleek, developing a shared vision with engaging with the community and other collaborators, themes, actions and projects, and heritage-led regeneration. The plan is very project implementation focused. It's less, there is background information as there has to be, but it's very much focused on projects that we can then identify who's going to deliver on them and how that's going to happen. So this is our plan layout: understanding Duleek, which is where the historical background piece, which details the heritage, the importance of the heritage of Duleek, etc. The action plan, and then the last part, the implementation piece. Our partnership approach. I suppose I'm interested as well to hear this morning how everyone has a slightly different spin on the requirement to do the Heritage Week event, which I think is an excellent idea. What we actually did was we had an afternoon, evening, a public consultation event, which you'll see down there in the bottom left. We had an online survey, which is up there on the top right, and we then, on the same day as our in-person public consultation event, we had our Heritage Week event in that building in the centre there, which is Duleek Courthouse, which was restored with town and village renewal money. And that is a lovely event space which the community use, and it was, as you see, the interior of it, and that's Charlotte Sheridan speaking. So Charlotte Sheridan spoke at that, and Tom McGimpsey, who's the architect for Duleek House, which is a building which has been received historic structures funding. So that was a really well attended event, as was the public consultation piece, which was, as you see there, we had 60 submissions in the online piece, and we had a really interesting afternoon, evening speaking to the public. It was really no more than Owen and Carlo. You really get a really great sense and feedback from those meetings with young and old at ours also. So strengths, challenges, opportunities, threats analysis was carried out. Lots of strengths, which is good to see. Obviously lots of challenges and also lots of opportunities. One of the biggest threats in Duleek, really, there would be quite a bit of industrial type development outside Duleek, quarries, and there is a waste to energy plant outside Duleek, so a lot of HGV traffic through the town, which is obviously not having a positive impact on the public realm. So that's one of our key, I suppose, threats and challenges with the implementation of the plan. So this is our shared vision. We want Duleek to fulfil its potential as a sustainable and vibrant place to live, work and recreate, celebrating its past, built and natural heritage and cultural identity for the benefit of all. And these are our plan themes. So we have our 5 themes: celebrating our heritage, defining our historic town centre, sustainable use of our built heritage, community space to enjoy our heritage, and governance. And again, each theme has a list of actions and also has a list of enabling projects. Again, I suppose based on how we approach plan making, we've done a quite a significant programme of public realm planning in County Meath, and we have followed the same process where we have a public realm plan with an implementation action plan, and we're following that same simple process here. So each theme has actions, and then we have more detailed projects. And some of these, and this is a strong feeling we have here, that these plan making projects have to be also about bottom up approach. It's not just all about what the local authority can do in partnership with the Heritage Council or others. It's also about what communities can do as they have access to funding, that they can deliver on some of these projects. And then it's also about getting private individuals engaged and welcoming the actions and enabling projects, and saying, putting up their hand and saying, I'll take on board, I'll do that. So that's really one of the big philosophies we have. So I've just got a few, the plan is really detailed, so I've just taken a few projects. So this is one, I suppose, speaking to what I said earlier in the presentation about Duleek's location. It's in a brilliant location, actually. This, when you see the location it's in terms of, you've got the Battle of the Boyne site, you've got the new, which we're really excited about here in Meath County Council, the Boyne Valley National Park. You've got the UNESCO Heritage Site. You've got Slane, which is the wonderful Slane Castle, the Ledridge Museum. It's got lots of stuff. You've got all of the stuff going on in Drogheda, and Duleek is so accessible to all of that. So but it's not really playing its part there. And I suppose the residents, the Duleek, the local tourist groups, obviously the business owners, all of those feel it can. So we have a project about presentation, interpretation and communication, and we have been in discussions with our Boyne Valley Tourism Officer on this particular aspect of the plan. Then we've got our public realm enhancements within the monastic core, and this is one where we have our laneways too. We have our very narrow laneways, which are very historic, referenced in the historical piece on the Battle of the Boyne in terms of the retreat of the Jacobite army through these laneways. So very, very interesting backstories and histories to these places that really just needs to be highlighted a little bit more, and in some cases, I'm happy to say, minimal enough intervention that will be quite low cost, and then others like the main street needs more major surgery to be done to it in terms of a palette of materials and upgrade works. And then our infill opportunities. Again, we've identified a number of locations where there are infill opportunities, and we have some examples here of that. And the plan contains more detail as to how these can be developed. And this, I suppose, speaks to my earlier commentary on the key thing about engagement with private owners and engaging with those that have ownership of vacant and derelict buildings. And we discovered, as no doubt my colleagues in other local authorities have discovered, once you commence a public consultation piece, the locals have an immense rich source of knowledge as to why a particular building has lain vacant for so long in terms of owners, and people are maybe abroad and so on and so forth. So we're building our knowledge on these items also before we get to the next stage of selecting the buildings, that the stage that Maura is at in Monaghan in terms of selecting particular buildings and seeing what owners are willing to engage with us moving forward. And then this speaks really to we'd be hoping to do is follow the lead from Nora. Maura is going to be my first phone call, I think, tomorrow after today's webinar, in terms of the reuse and adaptation of vacant buildings, and that's just a lovely. And again, the building, like the exterior of that building, you know, the photograph doesn't. I suppose the photograph would indicate it's not particularly a blight on the landscape, but where I really am concerned about it is there it is on the main street. It's vacant. Could be an excellent family home. And that's something that we really need to push in terms of, I suppose, what Pauline spoke about earlier in the morning about, you know, housing for all. We need to really link all of these pieces together. And then Project C here is just a streetscape enhancement and painting and palette. We have done quite a bit, on our HTI project in Kells that I referenced at the start of the presentation was essentially a painting scheme, which was a wonderful success and is a number of years old at this stage, and has had a lasting impact in the town. So I'm a really strong supporter of sometimes a project doesn't have to be an enormous project. It can be a very simple little project, and paint schemes are certainly in that category and are well worth. I'd strongly recommend anyone who's thinking of doing a small streetscape enhancement painting scheme that's something that is well worth pursuing as a first thing. You'll get business owners on board, you'll get residents, you'll get people on board very easily. They're a quick win, I suppose, and we all need some of those, as well as more detailed longer term projects. And then Project D, this one is of great interest. This is the Grange, and the Grange is a very historic site here that we're interested in looking at in greater detail. And this is Duleek House that, as I say, has received funding under historic structures funding, and this is zoned high amenity. So this is a piece, and it's the ownership seems to be something that the owners are interested. This could be an excellent amenity for the town and can link to urban infill. So you're doing two things here. You're creating sustainable housing which complies with town centre first. You're regenerating a backland area, and you're also providing people with a wonderful amenity. Whereas in common again with most Irish towns, we have a river down here. The town has kind of turned its back slightly on the river. So there are opportunities to kind of address that also in this particular project. This one is I say of particular interest to me because it does tick an awful lot of boxes in terms of cascading from national policy down. And then I suppose I sort of feel with these up, when you have an opportunity to present at these sort of webinars, I think it's important. I find myself, when I listen to others, that I find these slides are quite valuable. When I'm looking back at it, we find the timelines are quite challenging. In terms of from approval to start to getting finished and recoupment of the monies. Again, I just strongly urge you not to underestimate the extent of inputs. Like, external consultants are wonderful, and they're bringing a great deal of. We don't have an architects department here in Meath, for example, so we know bringing in external architects adds value that we couldn't possibly, our own staff couldn't add value to. So, but you shouldn't, even with that, underestimate the extent of inputs that the team, be it the Heritage Officer, the Conservation Officer, the Biodiversity Officer, the planners, engineers, etc. in the office will need to input into these projects. Admin support is key. We wouldn't be able to do anything without Mary McCarthy, who's our admin support in the Heritage team that we have here in Meath, and in terms of recoupment and just day-to-day liaison with the Heritage Council and with others. And I suppose one of the things I've learned as well from other projects where you're liaising with owners, you really need people on the ground to do that. Structured public consultation added value, and it added massive value. Holding in-person events was great to be able to do that post-COVID. People really enjoyed meeting and chatting and getting to know. They also getting to know who was involved, meeting the consultants, meeting the team in the council that are involved in the plan. And I think that's something that I would strongly urge every project to spend a little bit of time at the project planning stage on thinking about how you're going to do the consultation, what team you need in place to do that, suitable venue. We were very lucky. Meath County Council have an office in Duleek with a library, so we use that. Our municipal district meetings are held in the same building. So it's a building that people are used to coming to. And we also had the courthouse that I referenced. So it's really important, though, public consultation. I've done this job for more than 20 years, and I have found consultations can go very badly south if you choose the wrong venue. So that's just something, I suppose, a piece of learning I'm sharing with you all. And then going forward, what are our challenges in Duleek? Well, firstly, availability of resources within the local authority, competing resources in terms of bringing this to the next stage, competing priorities. We have a suite of public realm plans. We have loads of other plans ongoing that are non-statutory, and we obviously have our statutory planning work to do as well. Our heritage professionals, be it the heritage officer, our conservation officer, and our biodiversity officer, are all extremely under pressure with other work as well, and they're all needed to input into the implementation of a plan such as our Duleek plan. Available. This is, I suppose, a strong one for me in terms of, I just had we just had our assessment panel meeting yesterday about our BHIS and HSF, and it's again a theme that is constantly emerging in all of these projects. Availability of actual personnel on the ground to carry out refurbishment, building works, even painting is becoming increasingly difficult, particularly in the skill sets that we need. And I referred to it earlier in the presentation, land ownership structures and a need for landowner support is a key thing, and it's going to be a serious challenge for us, as we are already discovering in Duleek that the land ownership is an issue in terms of who owns the particular buildings we're targeting, and some of them are for sale, and maybe issues with maybe the local authority should acquire them, and all of these sort of things. So that's, I suppose I'll finish off, Ian, by saying we were extremely grateful for the funding from the Heritage Council, and we're looking forward to implementing the plan and the challenges. We like a good challenge here in Meath, so I think we'll be up for that. And I suppose we'll be looking to learn from those in the community that are at the next stage, in the likes of Castle Island and in Monaghan. So thank you again for listening.
Thanks, Wendy. That was brilliant, and we're really looking forward to seeing projects coming out of that. And I think you're right, the new emerging national park in Meath is going to be such a game changer. It's going to be brilliant to see how that pans out over the next few years. So thanks, Wendy. We're going to move on then we're going to Ramelton next for a presentation by Dr. Joe Gallagher, Heritage Officer, and Colette Beattie, the Conservation Officer. Joe, is Colette with us, or is it just you today?
No, we're both here. Actually, we're both in the same venue, so we'll just do a physical handover when the time is right.
Okay, even better. That's great. So look, I'm going to hand over to Joe and Colette now to tell us about their ongoing regeneration work in fantastic town that is Ramelton.
Thanks very much, Ian.
And see your son, so you're good to go.
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks to the Heritage Council for the invitation to come and speak to you today about our experience in Ramelton over 2 historic towns initiatives. What we've decided to do is talk just a little bit, just introduce you briefly to Ramelton itself, to talk about our previous experience and outcomes from our Historic Towns Initiative in 2020, and then to give you some advice on getting started on your own Historic Towns Initiative. And Colette then will take you through our Historic Towns Initiative for 2023. So Ramelton, the town itself was established around about 1610 along the banks of the River Lennon in North Donegal, north of Letterkenny. And there was an O'Donnell castle there from the 13th to the 17th century, so it's quite an old settlement. It was a very important port town, but it began to decline in the 19th century as the estuary began to silt up. The decline of the linen industry as well affected the town, and also the arrival of the railway into Letterkenny saw Letterkenny grow while Ramelton declined. But it is one of our 5 heritage towns. It's also a historic town identified in the Urban Archaeological Survey of County Donegal, and it has 40 protected structures in town. There are 115 structures on the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage, and there are 8 archaeological monuments. It's situated along the Wild Atlantic Way, and in terms of our county development plan, you can see that the built heritage and the unique historic character are also important in terms of its economic and tourism functions. So the Historic Towns Initiative itself, as you will have read, each local authority can make 1 application under each of the streams. The historic town has to have an indicative population of more than 1,500 inhabitants, which Ramelton had. We'll talk to you about some of our conservation plan-led and heritage-led regeneration approach, and also about engaging the local community, and that's really important. And we'll also talk about the match funding arrangements that we made for our projects as well. Somebody said earlier on, just in relation to funding, follows policy, and it was very important, I suppose, to place your work and our work in a policy context. And you can see some of the documents there that we referenced in our application: the Heritage Council strategy, of course, the new National Heritage Plan, Housing for All, Town Centre First policy, Climate Action Plan, the County Heritage Plan, and the County Development Plan. And there are others as well. But I think it's really important to place our work in a policy context to highlight its relevance and its importance. So for our first Historic Towns initiative in 2020, we focused on 12 buildings in Ramelton along Castle Street, around the Market Square, and along Bridge Street. And this is the kind of work that we did. This was the condition of the building of the Stuart Arms Hotel in town prior to the works beginning. There were structural issues within the building. Some of the internal floors had collapsed. There was roof problems and chimney problems. There's also, as you can see there, a shop front to the left that required attention. The windows had been boarded up, and thankfully when we removed the boards, we realized that in most cases the timber sash windows behind still survived, but they needed a lot of attention. So after works, we secured the external envelope of the building, and we're working now with the owner, who's hoping to bring the building back into use. He's a developer himself. Next door, you had the former McFadden shop, which was really a building site for about 10 years. There had been some work begun on it, but then the work had been abandoned. So again, we worked with the owner to try and conserve the external facade of the building, to make sure that the roof was watertight, and to reinstate the traditional shop front. And again, you can see the shot there after the work was completed. A little bit further on down the street, you had Stewart's shop with accommodation on the ground floor and above, and also the little shop unit there in the centre. You can see the encroachment of a PVC window where the original shop front window was, and then storage to the right. We had some roof and chimney repairs to do there. We employed a painting scheme. We had to steam the front of the building as well to remove some of the grime that had built up on it. With the result that you had the facade now sort of very presentable along sort of one of the main thoroughfares in the town itself. And you can see sort of the traditional shop front window reinstated there, replacing the PVC window. Inside the building, again, a lot of the fixtures and fittings still survive, and it would make a wonderful workplace for a small local business or an artisan business. And again, like I said, there's accommodation as well available there, but of course it needs a little bit of attention. This is an interesting example here. These are three small buildings on the corner of Castle Street and the back lane. So these were three small buildings. None of them really had outdoor space. And what we decided to do as part of the Historic Towns initiative was to combine them into one unit. And you can see there that there's a glass roof on one of the units. And we created a winter garden. So we brought the outdoor space indoors for that. And we combined the other units together so that now they operate as one house, essentially, with a little bit of an outdoor space in the form of the winter garden. And here you can see the property again, the same property before the works had begun, and now afterwards, and it's being used presently as a rental property in the town itself. Further up the street on Castle Street, this is a dwelling that's lived in, but there was PVC casement windows put in place a number of years ago. And we thought, just in terms of improving the streetscape, because you've got sash windows on the buildings on either side, we thought we would try and sort of improve the appearance of that structure. So we worked with the owner again to put in timber sash windows and to repair the timber doors and windows from the businesses on the ground floor, and the previous businesses on the ground floor, so that now it looks much more in character with the historic character of the town itself. And again, the painting scheme, as one of the earlier speakers said, really contributes to that as well. This is one of the businesses that we worked with at the Market Cross, at the Old House Cafe. And again, you can see there've been quite a lot of change with the PVC being installed there. And we looked back at the historic character of the town in the past using old photographs. This is one of the oldest buildings in town, and we wanted to restore some of its original features. And so now today it's got much more reference to its historic character right in the heart of town at the market cross. And as you can see, it's open for business. Our community partners was the Ramelton Georgian Society, and we worked with them in relation to the Georgian House on the Brae, which was in their care for many decades, and they'd been trying to get funding to actually repair the building and to bring it back into use. So the Historic Towns Initiative was an ideal opportunity for that. It needed works to the roof, repairs to the roof. It needed substantial repairs to the quite substantial fenestration, both to the front and to the rear of the structure, and also to the doors as well, and to the rainwater goods. So as part of the Historic Towns Initiative, we secured the external building envelope again, and now the Ramelton Georgian Society have leveraged other funding and secured other funding, including funding from the Heritage Council, to bring that building back into use, back into community use as a community hub. Our Ramelton Historic Towns Initiative in 2020 has been nicely recognised in some of the awards as well. We won the Urban Design Award from the Royal Institute of Architects of Ireland, the Heritage and Built Environment Award from the Chambers Ireland Excellence in Local Government Awards. And we were one of 3 projects that were shortlisted across the British Isles for the Sustainable Heritage Award for the inaugural SPAB Heritage Awards. So it was very rewarding to see that the work was recognised and that the approach that we'd taken seemed to be on the right track. So what was that approach, and what lessons perhaps is there to be learned from what we undertook? Well, our approach was very much conservation plan led. We had a conservation plan in place since 2018. Our colleagues in the planning division also had developed a Ramelton action plan and had undertaken public consultation as part of that process to highlight what was the community priorities. So we worked with documents like that in terms of providing supporting evidence for our application. We also provided previous examples of heritage-led regeneration in the town, such as the Ramelton Town Hall, which was a work that was undertaken by the community a number of years ago. We also highlight some of the heritage-led initiatives, such as the Ramelton Audio Heritage Tour, which was produced with part funding under our County Heritage Plan. So projects like that we highlighted as well in our application. One of the first important steps, I suppose, that many of us will face is establishing a Historic Towns Initiative partnership team. And even within Donegal County Council, as some of our speakers have already said, that's not always straightforward. It requires collaboration between different directorates. In the case of Donegal County Council, Colette, as Conservation Officer, is based in the Planning and Community Development Directorate of Donegal County Council, whereas I, as Heritage Officer, am based in the Culture Division of the Housing, Corporate and Culture Directorate. So again, it was really important that we collaborated because we wouldn't have been able to deliver this project on our own. So that idea of collaboration is really, really important in cross-directorate working. Another very important member of the team was Joanne McMenamin, who provided administrative support for the project. We worked with our community partners then, the Ramelton Georgian Society, and I really must mention Joe Burney, who's Secretary of the Ramelton Georgian Society, and Jean Winston, who are 2 ambassadors for heritage in Ramelton and 2 stalwarts of the local community. And they were pivotal in terms of bringing the community along with us. They also procured the services of Duncan McLaren, a Grade 1 conservation architect with Daedalus Architecture, to provide the original scope of works for our work in 2020, and also the scope for our work under the Historic Towns Initiative in 2023 that Colette will tell you about. Just a couple of issues that I'd like to highlight here, and I think they've probably been mentioned already in some of the previous speakers. The lack of heritage staff in local authorities is an issue, I think, for some of these schemes. I think for the Historic Towns Initiative, where heritage is at the heart of the scheme, I think that's wonderful, and it requires the cooperation and collaboration of a heritage officer and a conservation officer, where conservation officers exist within the local authorities. And it's great to see now the other sources of funding that are becoming available, some of which we've heard about already this morning. But again, I think it's really important that in those schemes that the heritage oversight is addressed properly, and that there's sufficient capacity within and without the local authority to address those heritage issues. That really needs to be built into the design of those schemes. And like I said, I think one of the strengths of the Historic Towns Initiative is that's built into the design of the scheme. The other issue that I just maybe like to highlight as well is the demand that's on local communities at present. As I said, we worked wonderfully well with the Ramelton Georgian Society, and they've devoted a lot of time and effort in order to deliver in terms of the community participation in the scheme. But again, there's a lot of demands being placed now on voluntary community groups in these local communities, and that's proving to be a real challenge for them. So there was a need for strong conservation supervision, and as you saw, we have our Grade 1 conservation architect in place, Colette, and myself then as Heritage Officer providing oversight on the scheme. It was very important as well to engage the local community and secure the commitment and participation from the property owners at an early stage as well. So we sat down with them all, and based on the priorities in our conservation plan and in the Ramelton Action Plan, we identified the properties that we wanted to include in the scheme, and we approached the owners then in terms of getting their participation in the project. We secured letters of support as well from the property owners and from the local authority directorates. We also then worked with our community partners to get letters of support from heritage groups, community groups, businesses, churches, sports clubs, community organisations and tourism organisations to show the strength of support that there was in the local community behind the scheme itself. Because we were again identifying the properties for inclusion in our scheme, you know, again, the lack of property registration in some of our towns and villages can be a barrier for addressing vacancy and dereliction of historic buildings. So again, you know, it's really important to have the support of the property owners, to have their engagement and to have their commitment to carry these works forward, and also commitments in terms of match funding as well. So again, it's something perhaps to check in terms of the design of your own schemes. There's an opportunity to leverage additional funding as well under the Historic Towns Initiative. Under our scheme in 2020, we've got 290,000 from the Heritage Council, and Donegal County Council provided 50,000, and the property owners provided 30% match funding. Under our scheme in 2023, we secured 40,000 from the Heritage Council. Donegal County Council provided 25,000 euro in match funding as well. And I've also mentioned there to design the project, a larger project if possible, if your resources allow. The reason being because of the tight timeframes and in terms of the drawdown and demonstrating the expenditure, it's always good to have a little bit of capacity there. So if you can design a slightly larger project, it's a good opportunity to do that. We discharged our funding in the form of a grant to the Ramelton Georgian Society on the basis of a legal agreement. And similarly for our project in 2020, we similarly discharged our funding in the form of a grant to a residents association by way of a legal agreement. And the legal agreement is important because it protects the interests of the local authority. It provides clarity and certainty to the project participants in terms of what it is they're getting in terms of the scheme itself. In terms of their investment, it sets out their investment, it sets out the investment from the local authority, and it sets out the grant funding that's available. And it also says what works will be done for that funding. It ensures compliance with the grant conditions as well, which is really important. And it also confirms the match funding arrangement because those commitments are secured before the legal agreement is signed. So at this stage, we will go on now to look at our 2023 Historic Towns Initiative, and I'll hand you over to Colette to tell you about that. Thank you.
Yeah, so this year our project was for a regeneration plan for 10 historic landmark buildings, which have a range of different challenges. We also had a small capital works budget for emergency repairs. You can see from the locations, the map, the locations of the buildings outlined in red. They're in 3 groupings along the River Lennon. The 10 heritage buildings tell the story of the town, and they were identified in a general conservation plan for the town. and their Melton Action Plan as being at risk and that we could lose them. So the main purpose of the plan was to support each of the owners in terms of looking at repairing and bringing the buildings back into use. So the plan was quite targeted. There are a number of constraints in this particular area along the historic quay and mall, which we particularly wanted to assist the owners with, such as flood risk. It is in a zone of archaeological potential. There are ecological issues, and most of the buildings had structural issues, and there are historic buildings which need conservation and fit. So a multidisciplinary team of consultants worked with the owners, consisting of a conservation architect, a structural engineer, an archaeologist, and an ecologist. And stakeholder meetings were also held within Donegal County Council to provide support to the owners. And we are particularly grateful for the input from the flood relief team, the regeneration team, and the development management team. So each of the buildings were here that you can see on this map were assessed. Sketch design proposals were developed with the owners in relation to future uses and approaches to issues like flood mitigation and resilience. So again, structural and measured surveys and methodologies for repair were developed for all the buildings. Detailed pricing and tenders for the works and method statements for their implementation were also prepared. And finally, an exploration of all funding opportunities to realise these works and bring the buildings back into use. So you can see from this table here that all the buildings were of historic significance. They were either protected structures or on the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage. In terms of use, you will note that most of them were vacant, and the buildings that were partially in use were of substantial terrace and would benefit from doing works together in terms of economy of scale. So our advice is to start your works as soon as possible after you've been awarded your grant. And for us, in terms of our work programme, we immediately got all the consultants on site. We arranged meetings with the owners and stakeholders, and we attended immediately for our contractor. So this slide here shows a context of the selected buildings along the river, which is tidal and fluvial. So there's real flooding issues in this area. And this photograph also gives you an idea of the scale of the buildings that we were dealing with. So this is a warehouse that was on the previous slide. It has recently been converted into two townhouses. And to address flooding issues, you can note from the photograph that the ground floor was raised and the front entrance hall was made resilient, so if it does flood, that could be easily brought back again. So the repair building is just there on the left, and in the foreground you can see our first building and our plan. And you can see that the building is clearly in risk, and the council have had to erect hoarding to protect the public. So this is a really challenging building, but it has great potential. So it extends right out behind onto the Aller Street. And at the rear of the site on the Aller Street, this is the second building. In our plan, it's a former grain store. And you can see that this building also presents huge challenges. And also in between the buildings, it is thought the remains of a castle are located there. So in terms of sketch proposals done in conjunction with the owners, you can see that it shows the potential for the conversion of the warehouse to the front. And what they've done is kind of, in terms of the ground floor, that has been allocated for storage in a common room. And then apartments then will be developed on the upper floors. The grain store on the other street would be then a townhouse. And there is a potential to develop duplex units in between. The parking for all the units then would be screened by an historic wall. So this option would potentially provide 8 units right in the centre of the town. So just moving on down the road is the next group of 5 buildings. So this is the first here. It's a vernacular former bar, and you can see that the challenges here. And to the rear of this building is the second building. It's a substantial warehouse, and it's supposed to be the oldest warehouse in Ramelton. So to the left is the bar, and to the right is the warehouse, and in between you can see an overgrown piece of land, and you can also see the relationship to a small park, and there is a possibility of a future use with an opening into this area. So again, it has enormous potential. So this is the front elevation of the warehouse. The roof has partially collapsed, taking with it the floors. And there's interesting levels in terms of converting this building. But sketches were developed in terms of a cafe, a residential unit in the former bar, and also then in terms of the warehouse, again, it was designed with storage and a common room on the ground floor to ensure it's flood resilient, with 2 then duplex units on the upper floors. So this has huge potential in the centre of town with easy access to the quay and just right beside the park. So right beside these 2 buildings, Buttonham, is a large stone building, which has been divided into 3 buildings. So these are partial in use, and they really benefit from the professional team as the basements are flooding, and it was determining the cause of this. Extensive roof works need to be carried out. So there would be an economy scale if this could be carried out at the same time by all 3 owners. So all the works have been detailed and costed for the owners, and other ideas in terms of fully utilising the building have been explored with the owners also. So you can see these buildings here in these photographs. So the bar is there on the right, and you can see the large stone building with the beautiful Georgian windows and doorways. And this is the side of the Georgian buildings facing out onto the river. And these are the buildings where their basements are currently flooding. So this elevation fronts onto a public square called Gamble Square, and we used our capital funds to repair all the windows as some were so dangerous they were identified as a safety risk. So in terms of a pathway to payment, we had various sign-offs. So firstly, the architect certified and issued invoices. Joe and I then verified the works and the reports. Bills were then submitted by the Georgian Society to Donegal County Council, and partial payment was released to the Georgian Society to make payment then to the contractor and professionals. So this photograph shows them all further on down the river, and shows the context of really the last group of buildings. So you can see a pair of derelict Georgian properties just there on the right, which are prominent in the streetscape. And this shows a more close-up photograph showing that they have significant street frontage, and they have all their historic material there and have enormous conservation potential and would make incredible homes in the centre of the town. So a schedule of repairs have been prepared and priced, and grants have been identified for the owners. So our last building in our regeneration plan is this large warehouse complex. So it's right behind those Georgian buildings and kind of hidden from the streetscape. The plan kind of shows the scale of the buildings, and this photograph shows that all the original material is here in these buildings as well, and also just shows just how poor condition the roof is in. And these particular owners are really excited about converting the warehouses into 3 houses. And you can see the internal space will just make fantastic properties. So this sketch proposal shows 3 substantial houses, each with their own gardens, one with a belvedere garden, one with a courtyard garden, and one with a winter garden. And then they all would then share an open space garden to the rear. So again, right in the centre of the town would make absolutely amazing properties. So as part of our regeneration plan, funding sources have been identified for each of the property owners. And then finally, a copy of the regeneration plan was given to each of the property owners to aid them to bring their properties back into use. So Donegal County Council has made 2 videos on the HTA projects carried out in Donegal, and these can be viewed on the links here on the screen. I would like to thank the department for the funding for that. And also the first phase of the HTA works have been part of the RIAI film Old Town New Place, which will give you more of a flavour for the works carried out and of the town itself. We would like to thank the Heritage Council and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage for their support. And thank you very much for your time, and we'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Colette. Thanks, Joe. That was brilliant. It's great to hear about the the latest phase of works in Melton. We're a little bit behind. I don't think we've any questions, Amanda, have we?
No.
Okay. So thanks guys, that was brilliant. I think what we'll do is Amanda and I will crack on now and we'll try to give you a very quick sense of the HTI scheme 2024. So I'll just share a presentation. If I can find it. Yeah, can you see that? Okay, so that should be moving. So thanks very much to everybody for everything we've heard so far. It gives a great sense of the work carried out in 2023 and the kind of lead-in work and a sense of the challenges, which we are well aware of. We appreciate the time frame and we do try work to build in as much flexibility as we can with people. So this is a rapid fly through 2024, and then Amanda will give you some tips from her side of the house as the grants manager. In terms of where we are, I think what you would have heard this morning is a lot of it is about the strength of local communities and businesses. Somebody said that, I think it was Wendy, that projects are so much easier when you are working with the community. I would say that it's pushing a car up a hill unless you've got really good buy-in and interest and support from the local community. We've been running this program since 2018, so that's up to 2023. That was the end of 2023. That was 32 towns. So we're getting good coverage across the 26 counties. This year we have about 1.5 million. And I suppose this is the other important point. The deadline is the 16th of February. That's 5 p.m. So aim for that date. So we've two streams. So what we're saying is one application per stream from each local authority. You can do that. We only take applications from local authorities. We anticipate a small number of towns in 2024. Applications are assessed by a national steering group. That's ourselves in the Heritage Council, our colleagues in the department, and Fáilte Ireland. Priority will be given to applications that are plan-led. So a plan is good. Money typically follows policy. So that could be a conservation plan, a HTI framework along the ones, the framework we published about 10 years ago with the department, public realm plan, eligible actions from a town centre health check plan or equivalent. Back to the point about local communities, a range of partners is always good. Letters of support just are a great way to manifest that. We've increased the funding this year per project up to a maximum of 350,000. We have underspent in this programme in the last 2 years. So we would really like to see all that money being expended. And that was partly why we increased that ceiling to 350,000. The other point there is if you apply, you have a very good chance of being funded because we have underspent. Again, the other point that came up this morning, we'd like to see strong public engagement through Heritage Week. That's a feature of all Heritage Council grants. What towns are eligible? I don't think we've ever turned a town down because it wasn't historic enough. So what you saw today in Bantry was a late 20th century building being funded. So if we have turned a town or an application down, it's because it was under the 1,500 population size. And I think we only ever did that in one case. So we've never said a town isn't historic enough. Kind of policies, Housing for All 2021 is a policy we have to give due regard to. terms of bringing vacant or underused floor area in historic buildings back into residential use. We can offer a 2-year facility, which is what you saw in Monaghan, for residential reuse projects, which are particularly complex. On the other projects, the likes of Bantry, we try to be as flexible as we can in terms of funding. So check your letter of offer for details on how funding is to be spent over the 2 years. Under the plan strand or stream 2, you saw the plans, the works that have been carried out to date, the presentations, Carlow, Duleek, Ramelton. We also funded plans last year in Macroom and Enniscorthy. And we're not prescriptive in terms of how those plans work. What would I say? There should be public facing, there should be consultation. As you'd expect in a heritage-led regeneration plan, heritage to the fore, but also think about those connections. And I think this came across this morning about other plans. So that's town centre first, what's in the local area plan, what's in the public realm plan, housing for all, Heritage Ireland 2030. So think about those other plans as well, and put them into that kind of context. And then obviously, if you're doing a plan, we'd like to see some emphasis on reuse, getting people back into the town centre and getting those derelict properties back into use. We've increased the funding for plans from 40 to 50,000 this year. Match funding of 20% is required, and you can apply for stream 1 and stream 2. Capital works, kind of things we've talked about, regeneration projects implemented and designed by local authorities, projects that encourage private owners and occupiers to invest in appropriate conservation-led works and repairs to bring vacant floor area back into use. Projects that address dereliction and vacancy, as well as conservation-led public groundworks that encourage investment. Climate change, anything that helps build resilience in that regard. And then the kind of things that you would expect a heritage body and the department to be insisting upon. Statutory requirements for protection of heritage must be met. We'd like to see a sustainable future use as well for buildings. The application process, this is the population level I talked about, 1,500 inhabitants minimum. Working with a town partnership team or local steering group. So what do you set out? The significance of the town, relevant policies, the track record to date. We like to see the involvement of the architectural conservation officer and our heritage officer. The really good projects we see have the ACO and the heritage officer working hand in glove, as well as any other local authority staff as well. What does your application tell us? Well, show us the partnerships, how it will promote heritage-led regeneration, the extent of matching funding, contribution in kind, and just where the leadership is, who's going to drive this project on. And the projects that you saw this morning, it was fairly clear. You know, a good project takes somebody to be responsible for it and to drive it on. And it's great to just see that at an application stage. The criteria then are how we score. These haven't changed. So 30% is bringing vacant or underused floor area in historic buildings back into use, or that address dereliction and vacancy. Your track record to date, 20% in terms of heritage-led regeneration, how it's likely to make a significant contribution to heritage-led regeneration, quality of the project, another 20%, climate change, 15%, and then just that community that's vibrant and engaged, 15%. Now, the question we normally get asked at this stage is about the first bullet point. If your project isn't about bringing historic buildings back into use, is it worth your while applying? Yes. If you have projects that are addressing dereliction, that are about the street-facing facade, about windows, doors, that open up the opportunity for buildings or streetscapes to come back into use, or which buy a building time, in terms of the street, we are interested in it. So don't be overly put off by that. In other words, don't be thinking that you have to have people in that building 1 month after the project deadline is over. Yeah, so that's my final slide. I'm now going to hand over to Amanda. And just to say, if there's anything that's not clear or you want to discuss a project with us, idoyle@heritagecouncil.ie, and Amanda as well. And we do like to work with people in terms of getting their applications in. Or if you have any queries, we will answer it. So I'm now going to hand over directly to Amanda.
Thanks, Ian. I just try and share I'm going to be very, very brief because I know people are probably anxious to get away from get onto their lunches. And I think, as Ian said, the speakers here this morning have really given a huge synopsis of what the scheme is about. And even to follow up on what struck me is the community level of community engagement, the enthusiasm and passion of the people driving these within the local authorities, and also the time constraints involved. So you really, really have to be fully behind this project if you are planning to apply, because there is a lot of work involved, but there's a lot of wonderful outcomes from it as well. So as I said, going to be very brief. So Ian has touched on most of it. Application, I would say we're still using our system that we put in place about 10-12 years ago. I'm happy to say we're moving over to a new system this year, but for the time being, we're stuck with it. So I would say if you haven't registered and you're thinking of applying, do so straight away, because we have had problems recently with people completing the registration process, emails not getting through. So do please register as soon as possible. And indeed, once you're registered, start the application, because you can log in and log out as many times as you want. Deadline 16th February at 5 p.m. System does shut down automatically. So if you're halfway through an application or about to press submit, it will knock you off straight away. We cannot accept applications supporting information after the deadline. And once the applications will go through an assessment process, and final outcome will be after our board meeting on the 7th of March. So possibly we might be able to let you know on the 8th of March. If not, it'll be around the 11th of March, which is the following Monday. If you are successful, final claims and reporting to the Heritage Council for year 1 is the 2nd of November 2024, and we plan to host some webinars or meetings if you're offered funding and in advance of claiming. So just some quick advice. Please, 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 I say this at all these type of webinars, read the guidelines. Allow enough time to complete your application. Doing an application online is time consuming. The system's also live and it does time out, so people have lost information. Save your information promptly as soon as you put it in, just in case a call comes in and you're brought to some other action. Traffic on the system on the final day is always, we get up to 90% of our applications submitted on the last day. So please, if you have documents to upload, have those kind of done as you're going along, rather than leaving everything to upload on the last few hours. I would say, answer your question, the application form is a template. It's quite generic. We haven't changed it in a few years. So answer those briefly, and where it really comes into play is the uploaded documents. So respond to the 5 assessment criteria that Ian went through, and that's really, if you can have documents to match those uploaded, then you should score highly on the at the assessment panel meeting. The 20% contribution, just to emphasize, that has to be a cash contribution. We don't recognise existing staff time or internal departmental costs or anything like that. It has to be an actual monetary contribution. Be aware that the assessor scoring your application might necessarily be familiar with your place, and we can't accept information afterwards. We can only score it on the information provided. Include, as we said, additional information, uploaded documents. You can upload as many as you like. They have to be in JPEG or PDF format, maximum 10 megabytes. And please name, it just makes it easier for us if you name the files clearly to match the document content. And don't use any fancy symbols or anything, just keep it to text. And all files, once they're uploaded, will be checked for viruses. Don't panic. You can continue on with your application, and you can even submit while the system is checking. I haven't, in the 10 years it's been in place, I actually haven't seen it reject any document. So just some brief examples of the type of information that we would expect to see with an application. For instance, for capital works, that there's a conservation works methodology and justification, copies of estimates, quotation, or other evidence to support the figures. I understand that most of you will have to go out to tender, but some idea or estimates drawn up by somebody who has expertise in that area. If there's relevant plans or audits or conservation management plans, to upload a copy of those as well. As Ian was saying, very, very important, and this usually gives great insight into how important a place is to the local community, is those letters of support. Evidence of appropriate approvals. You may not have them in place, but at least acknowledge that they're in motion. And I know, Joe and Colette were talking about theirs, which is what we call third-party funding. This is where you're giving grants to private owners, and Joe has down to a fine art now. So I'm putting it out there. I'm sure Joe won't mind. If you are thinking in that line, they have really, the administration in terms of governance and clarity and transparency is really excellent. And we like to see in the application how you are planning to manage that. So Joe is an exemplar for that kind of information. Current and clear caption photographs are a must. We love photographs. Assessors love photographs. Can't emphasize that a month. There's always oohs and ahs when photographs are opened. And a map is also very beneficial as well. That's about it. I know I've took out one or two slides while I was listening to the presentations, because, as I said, they were so good, so interesting, and really thorough, and hit all the wonderful aspects of the scheme as well as the challenges. So if I would say, actually, if there's, just to finish off, if you have any issues at all with the system, uploading documents, anything like that, please reach out straight away and we will help you. We can't help you at 5:30 in the evening after the deadline, but if you contact us at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, even 4:30, we will get those documents uploaded for you and you will get your application in. So if there's any issues, don't try and figure it out yourself. Contact us straight away at grants@heritagecouncil.ie. And that's it, and the best of luck with your application. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. So look, there we are. I think we've answered all the questions that appeared in the Q&A. I'm conscious of the fact that we've strayed into people's lunchtime, and we've all spent a long time looking at our screens, but I think there were some great presentations there. So I suppose there's just two things to say, and that's thank you to everybody for all their hard work and all their presentations. Brilliant to hear it. And thank you to everybody for staying with us. If you have any questions or queries on this in terms of projects, do get in touch to Amanda or myself. We will do our best to answer them. And then finally, good luck to anybody thinking about applying. We're looking forward to seeing the applications 16th of February. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.